Chapter 817. It was decided that Elmar would lead a few of the zombie kings and leaders out of the base. They would head towards the border between Anhui and Hangzhou to pick up the survivors that had escaped. Jian Xingtong had already brought his troops into Hangzhou's territory. They were hiding in a factory to rest. Jian Xingtong and Xia Yushin stood on the roof of the factory while the others hid in the factory below. All of them cut a sorry figure and looked extremely exhausted. Their faces and bodies were covered in dust, sweat, and blood. All of them looked like beggars with dirt all over their faces. Fortunately, the more people there were, the more power they could muster. The thousands of fighters had been reduced by a lot, but at least they were able to protect the hundreds of women. Their pursuers, on the other hand, were exhausted as well. Most of the weapons they'd received from Earth Dragon had long since been delivered to Hidden Cloud City. Once the city's leaders were killed, Starfire's men came to rob them all. Both sides didn't have much ammunition left. In order to save ammunition, they could only use their abilities to attack. However, Jian Shangtong and Xia Yushin were both level 6 ability users, and there was only one level 6 ability user in this group of pursuers. They were no match for Jian Shangtong and Xia Yushin. It was only because Jian Shangtong's side didn't have enough firepower that they were being suppressed. But it was impossible to defeat Jian Shangtong's side. We're almost there. Tell the brothers to hold on. Xia Yushin looked at the map in his hand as he spoke to his assistant. Yes. The assistant quickly retreated. Jian Shangtong stared at the rear with a deep expression, his brows furrowed. He said hesitantly, "Do you think the leader of the new base will let us in? After all, the people there were originally from Hades' base. Don't worry. For the sake of these women, she'll let us in." Xia Yushin wasn't as worried as Jian Shangtong. This was why he agreed to let Jian Shangtong save the women. Considering that the people in the new base were all survivors from Hades' base, they would definitely hate them. But as a survivor base, the more people there were, the more power they had. Only with manpower could they create resources, and the base could continue to develop. Only then could they withstand the conditions of the apocalypse and the zombies that filled the world. As a leader, he had to prioritize the interests of the entire base. Therefore, they saved these women as a show of loyalty. Even if the survivors of the old underworld base hated them, for the sake of these women, their hatred would be reduced to a certain degree. As for what would happen in the future, that would depend on the future. First, they had to join this base. When Jian Shangtong heard this, his brows relaxed slightly. How far away are those bastards from us? Xia Yushin's eyes suddenly flashed with a sharp light. A cold light flashed in Jian Shangtong's eyes as he said, "It's about 5 kilometers away from here. Their current ammunition can't withstand too much consumption. Otherwise, they won't be able to reach Haiqing safely." At this moment, the person who had gone out to scout for information suddenly returned. Not long after, he ran to the roof and found Jian Shangtong and the other two. "Boss, they've given up," a subordinate reported excitedly. Jian Sheng and the other two looked at each other and asked at the same time, "Speak." The subordinate replied, "I don't know the reason, but they've already taken a detour to the east. It looks like they're heading straight for Haiqing." Jian Shangtong asked, "They've already left?" The subordinate nodded. Xia Yushin was a little gloomy as he wondered why those people didn't continue chasing. Originally, the other party was very greedy for these women. What was the reason they gave up? The two of them didn't know that the reason the enemy gave up was because they received news that Jian Shangtong and the others would encounter a zombie gathering place on the way to the new base. It was like a zombie city, and it was impossible to pass through there. Moreover, they would have to take a long detour. Considering the consumption of weapons and food on their side, they were already stretched thin. They couldn't afford to stay outside and continue wasting time with Jian Shangtong and the others. Thus, in the end, they could only give up on Jian Shangtong and the others and turn to Haiqing. In any case, when Jian Shangtong and the others arrived at the zombie gathering place, they would also be in big trouble. They just had to wait to see them in big trouble. Jian Shangtong didn't have to wait for long before the person who had been sent out to scout returned. "Boss, The further we go, the fewer zombies there are. I don't know what's going on, but this is very beneficial to us. Jian Shangtong and Xia Yushin's eyes lit up as they said, "Is that so? It's almost time to rest. Let's hurry up and get going." After all, it wasn't only the enemy who had a shortage of food. They were no exception. The doors and windows of the factory downstairs were tightly shut, and it was filled with a group of people. Fortunately, this factory was spacious enough to accommodate 3,000 to 4,000 people. It was just that everyone was sitting together in a pile, leaning against each other. There wasn't even a place to lie down. In the safest place in the corner, a group of women sat in a pile. These women weren't all weak and incompetent. There were a few strong women who had just awakened and had good leadership skills. And this group of people was the group of female captives that Lin Xiao had released when he went to the Earth Dragon base to assassinate Long Yubai. "Sister Ting, when can we reach the new base?" Everyone leaned together with tired faces, but there was no despair on their faces. At least they were still alive. When they reached the new base, they would have a high chance of living a new life. Because they heard that the survivors there were all from the old Pluto King's base, and the deputy leader was their former deputy leader. With regards to Yuan Tianxing's character, the women here all felt that there was a light shining in their hearts. Thus, some of the younger girls couldn't wait to ask, "Soon, just hold on a little longer. We've already endured for so long. We don't care about a day or two, understand?" Sister Ting, who stood at the edge of the group of women, was a woman with her long hair casually tied behind her head. She looked to be in her 30s, but her appearance was somewhat androgynous. Her facial features were regular and carried a sharp aura. Her face was neither too big nor too small, and her eyes were shining brightly. She was also very tall, at least 7 meters tall. People who weren't familiar with her would often be scared away by her sharp eyes and serious expression. But those who were familiar with her would feel an invisible sense of security by staying by her side. Her words made everyone feel at ease. "That's great. When we reach the new base, we'll have food to eat and can sleep in peace." Everyone in the group of women only had this thought. Chapter 8:18. Jian Xingtong didn't expect that the people he sent to scout ahead had already been bribed. Thus, when they successfully reached a place where zombies gathered, Jian Xingtong suddenly raised his hand and stopped moving forward. "Stop the car." Jian Xingtong looked in the direction 500 or 600 meters ahead, and his expression changed. "What's wrong, boss?" The driver looked at him in confusion. Jian Xingtong didn't speak. He opened the car door with a frown and jumped onto the roof of the car with binoculars. Then, he used the binoculars to look into the distance. He saw that the road ahead was filled with zombies wandering around. The zombies closest to them had already stopped and were turning their heads to look in their direction. From time to time, they would sniff the air with their noses. Jian Xingtong confirmed several times that there were many zombies in front of them before jumping off the roof. "Adon!" After Jian Xingtong jumped off, he shouted to the back. In the end, no one responded to him, and no one appeared. Jian Xingtong turned his head to look back and asked the people in the car behind, "Where are Dong and the others?" The people in the car looked at each other and looked left and right. Suddenly, they realized that a few people were missing. "They're gone. They were here before. What's wrong?" Xia Yushin also got off his car at this time and walked to Jian Xingtong's side. "There's a very dense group of zombies in front of us. It's only a few hundred meters away from us. Logically speaking, when Dong and the others were scouting, they should have discovered it. But they said that this road is clear." Jian Xingtong frowned and said with a thoughtful expression, "Where are they?" After Xia Yushin heard his words, he subconsciously looked back. He saw that the people in the car were also at a loss. They couldn't find Dong and the others. Jian Xingtong's eyes flashed at this time. He suddenly looked back and said, "We might have been tricked." Xia Yushin didn't react for a moment and blurted out, "What do you mean?" Jian Xingtong asked his assistant to search the cars at the back one by one. As expected, after searching the entire fleet, they didn't see those people. Xia Yushin finally understood. "You're saying that the information they provided when scouting the road was fake? That's why they led us all the way here." Jian Xingtong looked around and found that there was only one way to go. If he wanted to take a detour, he would have to retreat several kilometers, but there was no other way. Even if it was a few kilometers, they would still have to retreat because there was no way to pass through the front. Xia Yushin put down the binoculars and said, "Let's go." The zombies seemed to have smelled us. He could already see the zombies in the distance moving towards them. Jian Shengtong immediately shouted to the back, "Retreat, turn around." Chun Xian, Li Jun, lead a team and prepare to defend against the zombies. Yes, yes. 2 level 5 paranormals led their respective squads with a total of 40 to 50 people. They ran towards the direction of the zombie horde and stood guard with their guns raised. As long as they saw the zombies rushing over, they would immediately open fire. This would at least buy them some time and give the cars behind them time to turn back. However, at this moment, a few figures suddenly appeared in front of them and landed directly behind the armed team that was preparing for battle. Wait a minute. Chun Xian, Li Jun, and the others were startled. They subconsciously turned their guns around. They aimed at the strangers who had suddenly appeared. Jian Shengtong and Xia Yushin stared warily at the 5 strange people who suddenly appeared. They were all wearing sunglasses. You are? The other party's intentions were unclear, but they didn't show any hostility. Although Jian Shengtong and the others were nervous and on guard, they maintained a calm expression and asked politely. At the same time, they sized up the appearance of the 5 people. Standing in the middle was a teenage girl with short hair. She was thin and wore black sportswear. Half a meter behind her, there were 2 people standing on each side. On the left, there was a man and a woman who looked to be in their 20s. On the right, there was a white-haired old man in a traditional Chinese suit and a 10-year-old boy. Looking at the 10-year-old boy, he wore a mask on his face and sunglasses on his eyes. He was wearing a boy's clothes. Jian Xingtong and the others temporarily treated him as a boy. These 5 people all wore sunglasses, giving people a strange feeling. This scene inexplicably made people want to laugh. What was going on? The girl in the middle asked expressionlessly, "You want to go to the base, right? If you go back from here and take a detour, it will take another day to enter the base. Are you sure you want to take a detour?" Jian Shengtong and Xia Yushin looked at each other and then turned to look at each other. For a moment, they didn't understand what these people were here for, but they raised their vigilance. "What do you mean? There are zombie hordes in front, and there are a lot of them. We have a lot of people to protect here, so we can't take the risk." Jian Xingtong looked at the other party and said, "We came from a base to pick you up and safely pass through this obstacle. However, if you have time to take a detour, I won't stop you, but I can let you safely pass through this zombie gathering place. It's up to you whether you believe me or not. However, I have to tell you that even if you go around this place, when you arrive at the base, you will still have to pass through the zombie hordes. This is not the only place with zombies blocking the way," the girl said indifferently. The meaning was clear. This was only the first obstacle. It wasn't that they could smoothly enter the base after going around this place. So, they still had to pass through the zombie hordes blocking the way. However, thinking about the location of the base, it was normal since it was originally in the zombie city. Jian Shengtong and Xia Yushin thought about it. Could it be that there were other conditions to enter the base? Or did they have to pass through these zombie hordes to be qualified to enter the base? In fact, the 2 of them were obviously thinking too much. They thought that the other party was saying that all survivors who wanted to enter the base had to pass through this obstacle. Of course, they still had their doubts. "Are you really from the base? Why should we believe you?" When a few people suddenly appeared and said they were from the base, most people would doubt whether it was true or not. Do you think other than the people from our base, who else would come out to help you? Or would they have the leisure to harm you? It's okay. You can go back and take a detour. We will wait for you at the second obstacle. The girl and the others weren't unhappy because of Jian Xingtong and the others' doubts. Instead, they seemed to have expected this reaction. At this moment, the slightly bent old man with his hands behind his back suddenly opened his mouth. His voice was strangely hoarse and unpleasant to hear. You can use your binoculars to look at the movement of the zombie hordes in front of you and then decide if you want to take a detour. Chapter 819. Jian Shengtong looked at the old man in confusion, but his attention was always on the black sunglasses on his white hair. On the other side, Xia Yushin looked at them hesitantly. He couldn't suppress his curiosity and raised the binoculars to look ahead. But because he was standing on the ground, he couldn't see very clearly. But he still saw a different scene. To confirm that he didn't see wrong, he turned around and jumped on the roof of the car to look again. Old Jian, the zombie horde is gone. Suddenly, Xia Yushin said in surprise. What? Jian Xingtong suspected that he heard wrong. Just now, the two of them did see a large number of zombies blocking the road. Not only the road, but the empty alleys and streets were also crowded with zombies. Now that he heard Xia Yushin say that the zombie horde was gone, he thought he heard wrong. Quick, come up and look. They really are gone. Xia Yushin looked again in surprise. He really didn't see the zombie horde. He immediately turned his head and waved at Jian Xingtong. Jian Xingtong jumped up and picked up the binoculars he gave him to look ahead. He looked, and indeed, there was no zombie horde. How is it? Do we still go around? At this time, Elmar said. Jian Xingtong put down the binoculars and looked at her, but didn't say anything. How many people do you have? At this time, the old man suddenly asked. About 4,300 people. There are women, old people, children. Most of them are injured and weak. At this time, Xia Yushin jumped down and walked a few steps forward. The old man turned his head and looked at Elmar. Elmar said, "We will send you to the base. Get in the car." Jian Xingtong also jumped down and hesitated with Xia Yushin. "Let's go. If we go around for another day, we don't know what we will encounter. Why don't we try to believe them?" Xia Yushin said. His intuition was that these people could be trusted, and now they really couldn't see the zombies in front of them. Jian Xingtong jumped down, but still hesitated. After all, it was too dangerous, and with so many people, he was afraid that if he brought them along, they would fall into a disadvantageous situation and harm everyone. What are you worried about? In any case, although we are very weak right now, we still have our strength. If you can't even get through here, then it'll be even more difficult in the city. Xia Yushin nudged him with his elbow. All right then, I'll trust you for now. Jian Xingtong looked at Elmar and the others and waved his hand for Chun Xian and Li Zhen to return to their positions. At this moment, Elmar shouted, "Ah, see, go to the last car and guard it." The little boy beside her leaped onto a nearby tree, then leaped back a few times and landed at the very end of the convoy. Jian Xingtong, Xia Yushin, and the group of people behind them. This child seemed to be very powerful. After all, most of the people who awakened their arcana were adults. There were very few children, and even if there were, it would take a long time for them to level up. However, the silent child in front of them turned into an afterimage and flashed to the back. It made Jian Xingtong and the others feel some pressure. "Let's go. What are you waiting for?" Elmar appeared on top of Jian Xingtong's car in a flash. At this moment, in the Universal Base, some people were very well informed. It didn't take long for him to know that a group of people from the Earth Dragon Base was going to enter the Universal Base. Most people could not accept it. What? People from the Earth Dragon Base? Why did they let them in? If it weren't for them, how could our Hades base be destroyed? I protest. We can't let the people from the Earth Dragon Base in. That's right. They are all our enemies. Now, they want to join our new base to survive? Dream on. Because the people here were now people from the old Hades base, and the deputy leaders were Yuan, Tianxing, and Lin Feng. These people still regarded this place as the Hades base. Therefore, everyone began to gather in front of the base's government building, asking for an explanation. They also wanted the base to give up the plan to accept a group of survivors from the Earth Dragon base. However, there was a small group of people who did not care about the matter at all and had an indifferent attitude. If they came, then so be it. Anyway, this was a new base with a new system. Even if they didn't accept people from the Earth Dragon base this time, they would definitely accept people from other bases in the future. Now, there were only a few bases in the country, and there were only so many humans. If they continued to kill each other, wouldn't they end up being eaten by zombies in the end? Moreover, this was just a new base, and it was the time when they needed manpower. They wouldn't refuse people who wanted to join. There's also a small group of people who heard that this group of people brought a lot of women to join. For the sake of these women, they wouldn't refuse. In this new base that lacked women, a group of men stared at Lin Wenwen, Long Qingying, Duan Wan, and other women every day, drooling. They had nowhere to vent their desire, and it was already driving them crazy. If these women weren't strong and not simple people, perhaps they would have already been killed by some evil people. After all, only a small group of people liked men. Most men still liked soft and elastic women's bodies. For this group of women who originally belonged to the Hades base, they wouldn't refuse. Lu Tong, who originally had nothing to do with it, pretended to protest and followed everyone to the government building to block the people. The soldiers under the building were fully armed, and they stopped the people who wanted to rush in. Everyone calm down, don't get excited. Even if you don't want to let those people from the Earth Dragon base in, can you think about those hundreds of women? They are all survivors of the original Hades base, and they were originally sent to the Earth Dragon base as prisoners. Now that they are finally liberated, do you want to keep them out? Maybe there are your sisters among them. Maybe there are your relatives and friends. Standing in front of the door of the government building behind the soldiers, Lin Feng raised his hand to calm everyone and explained. Sure enough, after he said so, everyone quieted down for a moment. But soon, someone said, then let the people who belong to our Hades base in. The people from the Earth Dragon base are not allowed to enter. What this person said was obviously very realistic. Moreover, it was somewhat unreasonable. A large group of people risked their lives to help you send back your sisters and friends, but you actually rejected them all at the door, and there's zombies outside the door. Obviously, you are burning the bridge after crossing the river. Yes. Let the original people of the Hades base in, others can't enter. But for the hatred of the Earth Dragon base for destroying their families, these people couldn't let go no matter what. Lu Tong stood at the forefront, throwing himself at the muzzle of the soldiers, but very calmly said to Lin Feng, Deputy Leader Lin, please invite Deputy Leader Yuan to come out. You don't have the final say on this matter. We have to listen to Deputy Leader Yuan. Chapter 820. Lu Tong was here because he wanted to see Yuan Tianqing. As for whether or not he would accept the new batch of survivors, he didn't care. There was a piece of cloth wrapped around his head, and there were some brown traces of medicine on it. Obviously, his injuries hadn't healed. Lu Tong just wanted to show his face in front of Yuan Tianqing, or at least make his presence known. Although he didn't know why Yuan Tianqing didn't notice him last time, and he was thrown to the side of the cafeteria, Lu Tong felt that someone was purposely disrupting his plan. But who was it? Did the other party know what he was thinking? That's impossible. But no matter who it was, he wouldn't give up the chance to get close to Yuan Tianqing. Therefore, he took advantage of the chaos to sneak in. Lin Feng looked at him, then moved his eyes away and said, This matter was decided by me, Deputy Leader Yuan, Commander Chen Yuding, and the others. What I said was also what Deputy Leader Yuan wanted to say. Moreover, this is a new base. If you want to create more resources, you need more manpower. If you want a strong base that can protect you, you also need strength. You are now part of the Universal Base, and the others who join are also part of the Universal Base. In the future, there will be no distinction. How can that be? Why do we have to be with the enemies who destroyed our original base? The people below immediately shouted. Their base is also destroyed, and our revenge is considered avenged. If you don't agree to let them join, that's fine. If you don't want to stay in the base with them, you can leave. We won't force you to stay, and we will directly send you to Sea City. Lin Feng's originally serious face sank, and his tone changed. These people only cared about their own hatred, but they didn't think about the base at all. What was this hatred? Lin Feng's family was also part of the Netherworld King's base, and Lin Xiao had died once, whose hatred was bigger than her. For the development of the base, Lin Xiao and he both hoped that the base could absorb humans. There was food, water, and shelter here, and the resources were temporarily abundant. However, what they lacked was manpower and creativity. When the people below heard that they were going to be chased out of the base, they were all shocked. They were very satisfied with the conditions here, and they could eat their fill and sleep warmly. Furthermore, they only ate rice and white flour, which was something that could not be found in other bases. As soon as they came in, they had never thought of leaving this place. let alone ordinary people like them who had to go to Sea City, a large base with more than 1 million people. There would not be enough supplies there, and even a mouthful of rice would be a luxury. Even Arcanists who were not at least level 4 or 5 would not be able to live like they did in Ocean City. Therefore, when Lin Feng insisted that the base wanted to take in this group of people and wanted to chase them away, Lin Feng's expression changed. Everyone couldn't help but panic. Lu Tong looked left and right and saw that even the sky had fallen silent. He rolled his eyes and suddenly said, "Since we must take them in, then don't put them in the same place as us. In order to avoid future conflicts, make them live far away from us." His clear voice spread out, and everyone immediately reacted. Seeing that Lin Feng wasn't going to accept their suggestion, they all agreed with Lu Tong. "Yes, let them live by the city wall. Stay away from us." "That's right. Since we have taken a step back, the base should also take a step back." Lin Feng looked at him and said, "In the future, we will not only take in people from Earth Dragon Base. As long as they are human, they can join no matter which base they come from. Of course, we will not let those bandits in. If you don't want to live with this group of people, then fine, I will let Deputy Leader Yuan arrange for them to live far away from you." Anyway, the base's city wall was built, and the area was large enough. Now that the number of people was still small, they could live anywhere they wanted. Seeing that Lin Feng had compromised, the emotions of the people slowly calmed down. Then they gradually dispersed. Only Lu Tong was still in the same place. He rubbed left and right, looking at the door with some unwillingness. He originally wanted to show his face here to Yuan Tianxing, but he didn't expect Yuan Tianxing to not show up at all. He didn't know when the next chance encounter would be. "Do you have anything else?" The guard on duty at the door saw that he was still here and asked kindly. "Oh no, nothing." Lu Tong was taken aback, then shook his head with an unnatural expression, then turned around and left quickly. Next to a window on the second floor of the government building, Lin Wenwen and Long Qingying watched Lu Tong leave in a hurry. They heard what Lu Tong said just now, and he seemed to be dissatisfied like those people who cause trouble. But when he spoke, he asked Yuan Tianxing to come out and give everyone an explanation. People who didn't know didn't think there was anything wrong with it. However, how could Lin Wenwen, who had been paying attention to him recently, not know that he wanted to use this opportunity to create a false impression of getting close to Yuan Tianxing? Actually, he can't do anything, right? Even if he got close to the deputy leader, so what? Do you have to be so nervous? If he dares to do anything to the deputy leader is not stupid. How would he let him succeed? Long Qingying's face was expressionless, but there was some doubt and confusion in her eyes. After all, it was normal for this kind of low-level person to want to climb up to the top. It wasn't the first time Yuan Tianxing was the deputy leader. Many people wanted to climb up to him when he was in Pluto. Lin Wenwen thought about that annoying scene, but she couldn't tell Long Qingying directly. At the same time, she wasn't sure if it would really happen, so she would rather believe that it was just her imagination. But now that she saw Lu Tong trying to get close to Yuan Tianxing, she felt that the possibility of that scene happening was getting higher and higher. She also knew that she was being nosy, but that was the person she had always liked, even if he couldn't see her. She also didn't want him to encounter that kind of dirty thing. This was already a habit in her life, or rather, after such a long time, paying attention to Yuan Tianxing's matters had become a kind of instinct. Lin Wenwen didn't know how to explain her current state to Long Qingying, so she could only sigh and say, "People make mistakes, horses stumble. This Lu Tong's not simple. I'm afraid that one day Brother Tianxing will be careless and fall into Lu Tong's trap. Aren't you tired of always thinking about him behind his back? He can't see you." Long Qingying, who had never fallen in love, didn't quite understand Lin Wenwen's feelings. She just felt tired looking at him like this. Once you get used to it, you won't feel tired. Lin Wenwen smiled faintly, but there was a faint trace of melancholy in her eyes, but quickly disappeared into the depths of her eyes. Chapter 821. Lin Wenwen and Long Qingying had been watching Lu Tong silently. On one hand, they were trying to prevent him from doing anything harmful to Yuan Tianxing, and on the other hand, They were watching Lu Tong as if they were watching a show. Lin Xiao stayed at Wu Qingyue's house for the whole afternoon and decided to go back. What made her feel strange was that while she was playing with Wu Yueling in the living room for the whole afternoon, this man just sat there for the whole afternoon. But he didn't say anything, and he didn't do anything. It was just like when he followed her to the base and sat in her office for the whole day. But this time, Lin Xiao felt a little different. She felt that Wu Qingyue's gaze didn't seem to be so persistent. Lin Xiao was slightly relieved. This is a good sign. Did this person finally realize that his target was too difficult to conquer, so he chose to give up? Although she didn't know if it was like what she guessed, seeing Wu Qingyue slightly distancing himself from her made her a little happy. After all, it was too troublesome to deal with him before. However, just as she was relieved, Wu Qingyue's next words shattered her. "You're going back so soon? Don't you want to stay one more night? Why? Are you afraid that I'll do something to you? Don't worry. If you don't agree, I won't do anything to you." Wu Qingyue looked at her with a smile, but his words were obviously flirting. Lin Xiao. She didn't want to talk to him. Wu Qingyue saw that she didn't want to talk and rolled her eyes at him. He smiled and continued. "Look, it's getting dark outside. It's too dangerous to go back at night. Why don't you leave tomorrow at dawn?" In fact, he knew that if she decided to leave, he wouldn't be able to stop her no matter what. But he couldn't help but want to ask her to stay. Otherwise, he would always feel uncomfortable. Lin Xiao looked at him calmly. Her expression seemed to say, "You continue. I'll just watch. I won't say anything." In fact, it was an expression that said, "I don't know you. What the hell was dark?" She was a base leader, a level 7 and a level 2 king. How could she be afraid of the dark? Although it was indeed dangerous to go back at night, with her current strength in the space, what danger could she encounter? No matter how big the danger was, if she hid in the space, who could do anything to her? It was not that Lin Xiao was arrogant, but she had already confirmed that this space of hers was like an invincible cheat. Thinking about it, it could even trap a level 8 arcanist inside, and even control the energy of the space to suppress the other party. Even if another zombie emperor came, Lin Xiao was not afraid that it would be able to break her space. This was because she knew that her spatial force was more effective against zombies than against humans. Seeing that Lin Xiao did not speak, Wu Qingyue sighed. He didn't say anything else. But at this time, Wu Yueling, who was sitting on the sofa next to Lin Xiao, heard her papa's words and her eyes lit up. Then she immediately lay on Lin Xiao's lap, supported her legs with her hands, and looked up at Lin Xiao expectantly. "Zombie mommy, stay. Stay here." Seeing his daughter's actions, Wu Qingyue's eyes, which had dimmed a little, lit up. Lin Xiao looked at Wu Yueling and smiled helplessly. "No, I have to go back to the base to deal with a lot of things. The earlier I go back, the earlier I can finish them." Wu Yueling pouted unhappily. She willfully wanted Lin Xiao to stay, but she was afraid that it would make Lin Xiao unhappy. Lin Xiao sensed her thoughts and said, "Lingling, be a good girl. Well, I don't have so much work. I will come to see you, okay? At that time, bring your sister Xiaolu and Tong here." Hearing Sister Xiaolu, Wu Yueling's eyes lit up, and her expression became relaxed. "Okay." Lin Xiao looked at her with a smile. Wu Yueling nodded repeatedly and asked in her heart, "You really have to bring Sister Xiaolu here?" Lin Xiao nodded and said, "Of course, when have I ever lied to you?" Seeing that Wu Yueling was defeated so quickly, Wu Qingyue was a little discouraged and said, "Since you must go back, it's up to you." The smile on his handsome face faded a little. After Lin Xiao drove out of High City with Duan Wan and others, they directly rushed back to the base. Seeing that they had left, the living room was a little empty. Wu Qingyue held Wu Yueling and put her on his lap. He said to her helplessly, "Lingling, when will she care about your papa a little bit?" Since the last time he realized that his feelings for the female zombie were a little complicated, Wu Qingyue had a feeling of sudden enlightenment in his heart. However, thinking of Lin Xiao's attitude of retreat and alertness, Wu Qingyue suddenly felt that what he had done before was indeed not sincere enough. Instead, he pushed the female zombie away from him. Wu Changyue had a sense of frustration in his heart. In order not to let the female zombie continue to guard against him, Wu Changyue had to stop attacking and keep a little distance. When a female zombie put down her guard, he would chase her. Wu Yiwelling looked up at her papa with a blank expression. Wu Changyue soon raised the sharp corner of his mouth, bowed his head, and said to her, "It's okay. Papa has a lot of patience. Let's spend time with her slowly, as long as we prevent others from coming to grab her from me." Thinking of Hu Zhiyong and Gao Haoyun's coveting of the female zombie in Huaxia City, even if they knew that the female zombie was strong enough and would not suffer losses. But the way those two people looked at the female zombie made him uncontrollably raise a burst of killing intent in his heart. As a result, before he could kill her, she directly killed him. In addition to realizing that this female zombie was getting more and more difficult to deal with, Wu Qingyue also found that her tolerance for this kind of thing was very low, almost no tolerance. Thinking of the last time when he was stirred up by a little man, he unexpectedly ate her and wiped her clean, but he could still live until now. Wu Qingyue inexplicably had a trace of joy in his heart. At least, although she was somewhat repelled and avoided that thing, she did not show that she hated him. Wu Changyue felt that his chance was still very big. Thinking of this, he could not help but think of the soft and elastic body of the female zombie at that time, that delicate touch and the taste of ecstasy. It made Wu Qingyue's whole body hot again. In fact, he was a person with strong self-control, whether before or after the doomsday. He was very self-disciplined. Occasionally, when he was suppressed for a long time, he would use his 5 fingers to solve it. The time before he turned into a zombie with that female zombie was the worst memory, but the time after she turned into a female zombie was something he couldn't forget. So now he had abandoned his 5 fingers wife. Looking at the current situation, if he wanted to eat her, he had to continue to endure. Thinking of this, he inexplicably had a feeling of wanting to cry. What was going on? Wu Qingyue sighed and thought. On the way back to the base, Lin Xiao did not know that Wu Changyue had already divorced his 5 fingers wife for her. Chapter 822. By the time Lin Xiao returned to the base, it was already around 8 p.m. She didn't inform the others and went straight to the hotel. As soon as she entered the lobby, she saw Chiu Lily, Elmar, Lu Jun, number 1, and number 2 waiting for her. When Chiu Lily saw Lin Xiao, she immediately went over and asked, "How is it? Is the zombie emperor dead?" Lin Xiao sat on the sofa and replied, "He's not dead. However, many of his kings of the 1st and 2nd rank have died." Hearing that the zombie emperor wasn't dead, Chiu Lily's expression collapsed. "Ah, he's not dead. Then why did you guys come back? Is the crisis over at the base resolved?" The others also looked at Lin Xiao curiously. The information they received wasn't very detailed. Lin Xiao glanced at everyone and nodded. Although he's not dead, his zombie core is a bit damaged. He can't use his ability for the time being. Chiu Lily's eyes lit up. When she heard that Mo Yin wasn't dead, but couldn't use his ability, she immediately became happy. Really, so it's like that. That's not bad. As long as he's having a hard time, it's fine. Anyway, without his ability, he's no different from a normal zombie. Chiu Lily let out a sigh of relief and smiled happily. Anyway, when she heard that the zombie emperor wasn't in good condition, she was happy. Lin Xiao looked at her happy expression and silently swallowed the words that Mo Yin was actually in her space. She felt that if she said it out loud, this child might be unhappy. "I heard that the 3rd batch of people came today, and there are quite a few of them. Have the injured been taken care of?" She changed the topic and looked at the others. They've all been taken care of. But because the people who originally belonged to the base had a lot of objections, Brother Lin asked the Yuanxing to arrange for them to be near the southern wall. However, the houses there still need to be renovations, so they'll stay there temporarily. We'll make other arrangements later. Xiadong, who was standing behind Lin Xiao, looked at the information he just received and said, "There are a total of 4,596 people. Most of them are injured, and their bodies are very weak because they haven't eaten anything. Also, there are 887 women and more than 200 children in that group." His team, and Liu Qianni had been taken out of the space by Lin Xiao on the way, and they had returned to the base in advance to look for Yuan Tianxing and Lin Feng to collect all the intelligence of the base in the past few days. Lin Xiao nodded and said with an expressionless face, "It's normal for the people of the old Hell King's base to have opinions about this group of Earth Dragons. Although they're also victims, those who should be killed have already been killed, and the masterminds are all dead. There's no need to accommodate these people too much." "Yes." Duan Wan nodded. "Who is the leader?" Lin Xiao asked again. "One of the deputy leaders of the Earth Dragon base, Jian Shangtong, and the most famous leader of the Rain God Corps hunting group, Xia Yushin. These two leaders were even attacked by another group of people from Sungin base and Earth Dragon base along the way." This time, it was Elmar who spoke. Lin Xiao nodded and said, "I know these two people. You can release a message to the people in the base. They were against Long Yubai's attack on the Netherworld King's base. Moreover, I didn't join in the end. Now I can be considered to have been implicated." The others immediately understood what she meant. Release this message. The people in the base's opinion of this group of people might be reduced a bit, and after a long time, they would slowly accept it. "I understand." Duan Wan nodded. "That's right. Today, in addition to this group of survivors from the Earth Dragon base, there is also a group of humans. This group of people is a detective team. It seems that they are here to inquire about our base's information. It's just that we don't know which side they are from." At this time, Elmar suddenly spoke again. Lin Xiao's expression didn't change, but his eyes looked at her. "Did you send someone to follow them?" Elmar nodded and said, "I sent a Wu and a Lu to follow them. Because the opponent's highest level was level 6, Elmar sent a Wu and a Lu to follow them. In fact, when she appeared in front of Jian Shengtong and the others today, there were 6 zombies behind her. It was just that she found that there were people secretly inquiring about something nearby. So she sent a Wu and a Lu to follow them first. A Wu was the 5th female zombie who liked to look at beautiful men, and a Lu was the 6th male zombie who followed the old man. He was now a level 1 king, a level 5 leader of natural wood element, and a level 1 king of earth element. Even if something were to happen, these two would be able to escape in time with their strength." Lin Xiao nodded and thought for a while, then said, "This time when we went to Huaxia, the people of Qingshan base seemed to be very interested in our base, so it may be them. But if you said that it was human beings, it should not be them. It may also be Skyfire base, because they didn't appear in Huaxia City this time, but they have been staying in a place not far from Huaxia City. When she was in Huaxia base, she had felt the existence of those people, but she didn't show it. Thinking about that direction, it was either Hidden Cloud City or Skyfire base. There was no strength in Hidden Cloud City, so it must be the people of Skyfire base. But they didn't intend to help. Did they want to sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight?" Everyone's eyes flashed, especially Duan Wan and Lu Jun, who used to belong to Hell King base. Their eyes flashed a sharp light. "I will go and have a look later. If they have already seen the zombie defense line, then we need to deal with it. In order to prevent them from leaking the information, it was better to go and have a look." Hearing Lin Xiao's words, everyone knew that they would definitely be killed if she went there. Other people also dispersed immediately. At this time, a group of people stopped in the position of dozens of kilometers away from the base. They were secretly inquiring about the information of the base. "Leader, this base is a little bit different." After Su Changmu went to the upper city to inquire about the situation, he came back and said to Gu Yikong with a dignified expression. Gu Yikong's ordinary face was still expressionless, but his eyes and the breath of his body seemed to be gloomy in the night. He asked faintly, "What's different?" Su Changmu said, "They seem to be raising zombies." Gu Yikong's eyes flashed, and he looked at him strangely. "What did you say about them?" Su Changmu thought for a while, and his eyes looked a little strange. "I saw that there was a group of zombies surrounding the base, and all the roads to enter were blocked. As for the group of people who went in today, they were let in unscathed. That large group of zombies have been driven away, and none of them were like ordinary zombies that would pounce on people as soon as they saw them. They are very quiet." "What do you mean? Quiet zombies? And a large group at that?" How come I've never seen a zombie horde like that before? Gu Ikong snorted, disdainful, but also curious. Nowadays, no matter where they went, the zombies were like a pack of wolves that smelled meat. Chapter 823. Leader, you may not believe me, but you can go and see for yourself. Su Changmu could only say this to Gu Ikong's disbelief. Gu Ikong was slightly stunned. Su Changmu's expression didn't look like he was joking. He put away his expression and asked hesitantly, "Is it true? There is such a group of zombies?" If that was the case, it looked like a group of zombies controlled by high-level zombies. Su Changmu nodded. At least we didn't see wrong. Moreover, after all the vehicles entered, the zombies would come back to surround them. We didn't even see the walls of the base. Raising zombies? They really dared. And those people aren't afraid? Gu Ikong's face sank, and he frowned as he spoke. I think our previous detectives should have been eliminated by the people in the base. After all, if news of this gets out, it will be very disadvantageous to their newly built base, Su Changmu said. Gu Ikong's eyes suddenly turned cold. Did anyone find you? Su Changmu shook his head confidently. No, the people I brought didn't go near. I was the only one. Other than Jian, Shengtong, and Xia Yushin, no one else could find us. Although he saw Elmar and the others sitting cross-legged on the roof of the car, they didn't have a strong aura, so he didn't pay much attention. However, he didn't know that Elmar and the others had restrained their aura. If it wasn't someone much stronger than them, or someone of the same species, there was no way to see their true strength. Gu Ikong suddenly smiled sinisterly and said, "Interesting. Continue to investigate. We must find out the secret of this base and that woman. Find out where her Achilles heel is." After knowing that the female leader of the new base was a poison psychic, Gu Ikong decided to get his hands on her energy core. There were very few special abilities like this, and those that could be upgraded to level 7 were even rarer. But the higher the level of the poison energy core, the more help it would be to him. Su Changmu nodded and said, "I sent someone to infiltrate this group of people from the Earth Dragon base, but it might not be easy to wait for the news to spread. Don't worry, take your time. This base is here anyway, so she can't run anywhere. And, raising zombies? Ha!" Gu Ikong said with a strange smile. Gu Ikong and Su Changmu didn't notice that the trees, grasses, and vines around them were trembling slightly. As if it had been awakened, the leaves on the trees would shake from time to time, and the grass on the grassland would tilt left and right. A few hundred meters away from them on a green forest road, the figures of two zombies were hidden in the shadows of the trees. He retracted his aura and stood there quietly. Female zombie 5 hugged the tree trunk and pressed her face against the rough bark, using her ears to listen to the inside of the trunk. A pair of pitch-black eyes flashed in the darkness. Number 6 zombie next to her looked at her posture speechlessly. "Do you think you're hugging a bolster? Can you put your hands and feet down?" Number 5 seemed to have sensed number 6's thoughts and turned to look at him. Her zombie eyes were now dark, but she could still see things clearly. Although the male zombie next to her wasn't very handsome, his facial features were very attractive. If you looked at him for a long time, you would unconsciously be attracted to him, especially his narrow and deep eyes, coupled with his serious and flat expression. His lips pursed into a straight line. Number 5 thought, why didn't she notice that this companion of hers was actually quite good-looking? If she could ignore the idiotic look in his eyes, it would be even more perfect. Silently separated her hands and legs from the trunk. Female zombie 5 stared at the male zombie with dissatisfaction. The male zombie expressionlessly moved his eyes away. At this time, the two zombies' expressions suddenly changed and then simultaneously jumped down from the tree, lightly landing on the ground. A black figure was quietly standing on the roadside under the tree. "Leader," the male zombie said in a hoarse voice, slightly bowing his head. "Roar dash, leader." And female zombie could only roar at the moment because she hadn't reached level 6, so Lin Xiao didn't heal her throat. "What did you find?" Lin Xiao blended into the surrounding darkness and calmly asked. The male zombie turned his head to look at the female zombie. She was the one eavesdropping. Roared, "Dash, they're here for you, leader." The female zombie said to Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao frowned. Why would they be here for her? She thought for a moment, then said, "I'll go take a look. You two go in." With that said, he pulled the two of them into the space. Then she turned invisible again and headed for the group of people. When they were close enough, Lin Xiao was sure they were from Skyfire Base. Aside from Gui Kong and Su Changmu, they brought a dozen level 5 adepts, 10 squads, and about 300 ordinary soldiers. Including all of them, that was about 500 people. Of course, Lin Xiao recognized Gui Kong. She had interacted with him many times in the past. She knew that Gu Yikong had always coveted her Hellfire energy core, and his energy core would also be beneficial to her special ability. She'd originally planned to take care of Skyfire Base after she'd come back to sort things out. At the very least, she wanted to take care of Skyfire Base before Little Man grew bigger and bigger. She didn't think Gu Yikong would come to her instead of doing anything in Huaxia. He'd come and die. Lin Xiao gently touched his abdomen. It was no longer flat below his abdomen. Little Man was right. She'd entered the puberty stage. After sleeping for so long, Lin Xiao's belly was starting to bulge. But it wasn't big, and she covered it with her clothes. The transparent figure gently leaned against Gu Yikong's side, still unable to sense Gu Yikong's thoughts. Lin Xiao turned to Su Changmu. "I'm going to find out the secrets of this base. I'm going to find out where the Achilles heel of this female leader is." Raising zombies, enemies of humanity, Lin Xiao sneered when she heard what Su Changmu was thinking. Sure enough, these people all thought zombies deserved to die. Those who allied with zombies were evil and were enemies of humanity. But then she thought back to her previous base. There were no zombies, and yet it was besieged by 3 other human bases. Was she an enemy of humans at that time? No. But what right did she have to be persecuted by other human bases? Some humans were even more evil than zombies, even crueler than zombies. Lin Xiao's eyelids drooped to hide the murderous glint in her eyes. She suddenly stretched out her hand, grabbed Gu Yikong, and threw him into the forest in the space. Don't you want to know her secret? Then I'll let you know. Chapter 824. After throwing the gloomy and cold Gu Yikong into the space, Lin Xiao released all the zombies in the space to play. Don't let a single one escape. Lin Xiao put away the chain in her hand, threw down a sentence, and went into the space to deal with Gu Yikong. Su Changmu still didn't know what had happened. He just turned his face away and didn't notice that Gu Yikong beside him had disappeared. When he turned around and found that there was no one around him, he subconsciously looked around. Suddenly, he heard an unfamiliar woman's voice. He turned around and saw that there was a group of people on the ground not far from them, a different group of zombies. Su Changmu's heart skipped a beat when he saw those pitch-black eyes that flickered with all sorts of colors. He immediately reacted, but before he could say anything, he saw the group of zombies flashed and instantly disappeared from where they were. One of the figures flashed towards him. A sharp killing intent and a strong sense of danger came. Su Changmu subconsciously dodged. "Everyone be careful. There's a zombie," Su Changmu shouted and immediately used his ability. When he dodged to the side, he directly rolled on the ground, and a layer of thick black hair quickly grew on his body. Roar dash, the human called Su Changmu disappeared and was replaced by a strong black bear. In the dark night, only a vague shadow could be seen. What s dash, bang bang bang, toot toot, boom dash. Suddenly there were screams, gunshots, and all kinds of explosions. The scene immediately became chaotic. The smell of blood instantly filled the surroundings. After Lin Xiao entered the space, she appeared on top of a tree where Gu Yikong was in the forest. After she fused her aura with the aura of this space, she stood behind the other person, and he would never be able to find her. Gu Yikong stood motionless at the place where she appeared, but his face was very dark and gloomy. His eyes constantly flashed with hostility. However, he was able to keep his composure and carefully observed his surroundings. He was vigilantly paying attention to the surrounding aura. "I heard that you're very interested in me." "Oh no, You're interested in my energy core. Lin Xiao stood on top of the tree, looked down at the back of the other person's head, and suddenly said faintly. Gu Yikong instantly turned around, and his body followed the movement of turning around. His eyes were cold and sharp as he stared at her. It's you. He didn't expect this woman to have such a trick up her sleeve. Where's this place? Was it an illusion? Gu Yikong had never heard of any space-type metahuman having trees in their space, so he did not think that it was related to the space-type metahuman. Instead, he felt that this might be an illusion caused by Lin Xiao's poison. Did you know? If he took something that didn't belong to him, he would suffer retribution. Did you see what happened to the Earth Dragon Base and Hidden Cloud City? Skyfire Base is next. Lin Xiao's expression was calm, but his eyes were unusually cold. He looked at Gu Yikong with a murderous look. Gu Yikong did not expect that she would suddenly say such a sentence, but he quickly reacted. His expression changed slightly, and his eyes darkened. You're from the Netherworld King's base? Did you do both the Earth Dragon Base and Hidden Cloud City? Lin Xiao chuckled. Yes, that's right. You guys stole my things, so of course I'll get them back one by one. I was planning to wait a little longer before making my move on Skyfire Base. I didn't think you'd come knocking on my door. What? I didn't expect my poison core to be so charming. But that's good too, heh. Hearing Lin Xiao's laughter, Gu Yikong felt a sense of foreboding. His eyes narrowed as he stared at the woman in front of him. Lin Xiao suddenly spoke up. Since you want my poison core so badly, I think you'll like this better. As she spoke, she flipped her hand, and a black flame appeared in her palm. The dark forest was not well lit, but that didn't affect his eyesight as a 7th level adept. When he saw the black flame, his heart skipped a beat. His eyes narrowed again. You dash, he opened his mouth to speak, but Lin Xiao didn't give him the chance to continue. She suddenly flung the hand that was holding the flame at Gu Yikong, and then disappeared from the tree in a flash. Looking at the black flames flying towards him, Gu Yikong's heart was alarmed. He instinctively used his discipline to block it. As he retreated, he raised his hands in front of him to block. One of his palms was facing forward, while the other was gripping his wrist. Then a dark green flame gushed out from his hand and met the black flames head-on. But just as Gu Yikong was about to use his discipline, he saw the green flame bursting forth from his hand. His face changed, and panic flashed in his eyes. What's going on? Why is my discipline? When he realized he could only use less than 1/10 of his discipline's power, Gu Yikong began to panic. When it collided with the green flame, Lin Xiao's black flame suddenly expanded. It turned into the face of a demon, opened its mouth wide, and swallowed the green flame in one gulp. Ugh dash, Gu Yikong grunted. His discipline was forcibly cut off. It was as if a fist had been slashed by a knife, but his wrist had been chopped off by a fist. The energy that had been cut off rebounded, and Gu Yikong's body couldn't bear it. But fortunately, he only used less than 1/10 of his energy, so the rebound was not heavy. But it was not a good feeling, as if his head was hit by something. The green flame that was swallowed by the black flame was cut off, and its energy was immediately swallowed by the black flame. Gu Yikong's discipline was poison fire, but his poison was several levels lower than Lin Xiao's hellfire. Moreover, his discipline had no temperature and could not kill people. But the poison in the discipline fire would quickly kill people. It was very easy for Lin Xiao to take care of a level 7 normal-type poison fire ability user. After all, she could even kill a level 8 ability user easily. After coming out, she found the surroundings filled with blood, and hundreds of corpses were lined up together. Did you miss anything? Lin Xiao asked. No. Pit, Ah Wu, and Ah Lu were standing next to the corpses. Lin Xiao waved her hand, and a wisp of black flame appeared in the darkness, and the zombies quickly retreated. The black flame gently fell on the first corpse, and then suddenly expanded, and then spread to the other corpses. In the blink of an eye, the corpses were burned clean, and even the grass and stones on the ground were directly swallowed up. Go back. Lin Xiao turned around and led the zombies back to the base. Chapter 825. After cleanly killing Gu Yikong, Lin Xiao returned to the base hotel dormitory. The next morning, someone came to Lin Xiao's door before she even left. Big sister, do me a favor." Lin Xiao opened the door and saw Lin Wenwen looking at her with a happy face and Long Qingying behind him. The hotel where Lin Xiao and the zombies were staying was not a place that normal people could enter. Only people with special identities like the Lin family, Yuan Tianxing, and Qin Yuding could come here. The soldiers guarding the hotel were not humans. They were all level 4 mutant zombies. Lin Xiao asked Yuan Tianxing to give them uniforms and hats, as well as special glasses. They did not have guns and were under the control of Qiu Lily and El March. All of them stood guard in the surroundings obediently, and they all recognized Lin Wenwen's or Yuan Tianxing's scents, so they were allowed to pass. If it was another stranger who came, they would not attack. They would just block the stranger expressionlessly without making a sound or saying a word. Of course, this was what Lin Xiao had trained before going to China. After passing the test, Lin Xiao let Qiu Lily and the other high-level zombies pay attention to whether they were breaking the rules. Now that there were more and more people in the base, Lin Xiao decided to bring the zombies to the other side of the wall after the human base wall was built. They would live there while waiting for the other side to be built. "Why are you in such a hurry so early in the morning? Why didn't you wait for me to go there?" Lin Xiao looked at Lin Wenwen and asked. I don't want others to know about this for now." Lin Wenwen looked back at Long Qingying and said to Lin Xiao. She wanted to ask Lin Xiao about the time when Lin Feng was pierced by the metal vines, but she didn't even tell Long Qingying about it. Long Qingying didn't think much of it and nodded. "I'll wait for you outside." Lin Xiao looked at Lin Wenwen and said to Duan Wan, "Go and inform them that the meeting will be delayed for an hour." "Yes." Duan Wan nodded expressionlessly and left. After letting Lin Wenwen enter the room, Lin Xiao closed the door. She asked curiously, "What's going on? Why are you being so mysterious?" Lin Wenwen entered the house, found a sofa, and sat down. He watched as Lin Xiao poured water for him. After thinking for a while, he slowly said, "Earlier, I encountered something. I don't know if it's a problem with my body or something else." Lin Xiao brought the water over and placed it on the coffee table beside her. She sat down and listened attentively. "Some time ago, when we were collecting resources on our way back, we encountered a very powerful level 7 mutant plant. Moreover, it was of the metal attribute. Because we didn't know that there was danger there, we just passed it." Lin Wenwen slowly told him about the tragic situation on the battlefield. She also told him about the impact she had suffered when Lin Feng's chest was pierced by the vines. Then, she went back to a few hours ago. No one had passed by that place, and they were all still alive. At first, I thought I had awakened another ability related to time, but later I realized that it wasn't the case. Because as time passed, the tragic scene of that day began to blur in my mind, losing the feeling of reality. It was like a dream, not something that had really happened. After returning to the base, I realized that I could sometimes see images of other people. Lin Wenwen said with a confused and uncertain expression. Lin Xiao's expression also became solemn. She asked, "Then did you go to the place with the metal vines? What were the images you saw of other people? Did it happen in the past or something else?" Lin Wenwen shook her head and said, "I didn't go there. When I returned to the base and saw the images of those people, I sent people to investigate. It didn't seem to have happened in the past. Also, I've been staring at someone recently. From the images of him, it seemed like he was going to do the things in the images in the future." Lin Xiao's eyes flashed. "And did he do it?" Lin Wenwen's expression became a little strange. She lowered her head slightly and said awkwardly, "The things in the images haven't happened yet, but I realized that person always secretly did things to harm others, so I couldn't help but stop him." Lin Xiao looked at her eyes and then at her bashful expression. Suddenly, she had a flash of inspiration. She couldn't help but smirk. "But what this person does is not good for Yuan Tianxing, right?" Lin Wenwen raised her head abruptly and looked at Lin Xiao in surprise. "You? How did you know?" "It seems that I guessed right. You only care about him, but I've never seen you care about us so much. Tell me, what on earth did you see? Who did you see it from?" She couldn't even see through her own sister's thoughts. How could she be the leader with that look in her eyes? Let's change people. It's a third-level spatial ability user. He seems to have his eyes on Brother Tianqing. He has been faking and creating opportunities to meet Brother Tianqing. Lin Wenwen's face immediately turned a little red when Lin Xiao saw through her thoughts. She didn't dare to look up and murmured with her eyes lowered. It's normal that there are so many people who want to get close to Tianqing. Tell me, what did you see from that person? What do you think? Lin Xiao asked her curiously. When I first saw his eyes, a small scene unconsciously appeared in my mind. That person seemed to have knocked Brother Tianqing out and then wanted to create a scene where Tianqing did that to him. In any case, I think that person's heart is not in the right place. If he really likes Brother Tianqing, I don't mind if he pursues me openly. But people who use this kind of method are too disgusting. And I think that person doesn't really like Brother Tianqing. He just wants the position of deputy leader. Lin Wenwen was a little embarrassed at first, but as she spoke, her face darkened and a cold light flashed in her eyes. Lin Xiao nodded his head, a look of understanding on his face. Is that so? It seems that this skill of yours is a bit like a foreseeing ability. Perhaps it is a mutation of your spatial ability, or perhaps it is a second ability that you have awakened. But since it's what you saw, don't interfere for the time being. Let's see if the final result is the same as what you saw. Lin Wenwen nodded. Oh, okay. After thinking for a moment, she asked again about that thing about time turning back. How do we prove it? Do we go look for that metal vine? She had never figured out what was going on. Lin Xiao thought for a moment and said, maybe you had a dream at the time and then dreamed of what was going to happen. Just like what you can see now, it's a foreseen dream. Although it was a little strange to say this, if she could combine the dream with Lin Wenwen's current skill, the possibility was very high. When I have time, I'll go see if I can find that metal vine. If I can find it, it means that my guess may be right. I can also harvest a plant-type energy core for little man, Lin Xiao said and touched her belly. Chapter 826. Lin Wenwen subconsciously looked at Lin Xiao's lower abdomen. Then her pupils suddenly dilated and became a little unfocused. It took her a while to return to normal. After hesitating for dozens of seconds, she suddenly asked, Sister, has little man grown up a little? Lin Xiao lowered her head and looked at her belly with a hint of softness in her eyes. She said, You can see it? Lin Wenwen's eyes flashed, and she suddenly murmured, I see it. I see it. Then she became excited and stared at Lin Xiao's belly, which was covered by clothes and could not be seen. I see it. Lin Xiao looked at her reaction strangely and looked up at her. She asked curiously, What did you see? Lin Wenwen looked up at Lin Xiao's eyes excitedly and said, I saw the scene when you gave birth. Just now, when she subconsciously saw Lin Xiao's belly, a small scene suddenly appeared in her mind and occupied her consciousness. It was in an operating room. Lin Xiao was lying in it with disheveled hair, and her beautiful face had become a little ferocious. A pair of eyes that were originally normal also became as black as ink, and a green light flickered in his pupils. There was a roll of towel in her mouth, but the towel had already been bitten by her sharp teeth. Lin Hao, Shun Yuzhen, and Lu Jun were in the operating room. He was wearing protective clothing and a mask, walking around Lin Xiao's bed anxiously. Shun Yuzhen and Lu Jun were beside him and helping him. Not long after, a baby's cry was heard, and then the whole picture disappeared. In the end, Lin Wenwen's attention was attracted by the loud baby's cry. Lin Xiao's eyes widened slightly when she heard the words. She said in surprise, What? You can even see this? Lin Wenwen looked a little excited. She nodded repeatedly and suddenly stood up. Her eyes were still fixed on Lin Xiao's belly, but soon she was discouraged. Lin Wenwen, who was discouraged, sat down again with a frustrated face. But I didn't see what the baby looked like, so I didn't know whether it was a boy or a girl, but I heard a loud cry. Speaking of this, she smiled and looked at Lin Xiao's belly with shining eyes. Hearing what she said, Lin Xiao was slightly infected by her excited mood. The smile on his face deepened. Lin Wenwen's words gave her a good omen, At least it calmed her somewhat uneasy heart a little. I hope it's really like what we see, and that we can safely give birth to her, Lin Xiao said. He had always been worried that his zombie body would not be able to give birth to the child smoothly. After talking to Lin Wenwen about her new skill, Lin Xiao took her to school for a meeting. When they arrived at the conference hall, Yuan Tianxing and the others had been waiting for a long time. Her seat was already filled with all sorts of documents, some of which were given to her by Xie Dong last night. He had already seen and roughly understood it. This new batch of people also opposed Long Yubai's attack on the Netherworld King's base when they were at the Earth Dragon base. In fact, they could be considered our allies. It's not difficult to accept this group of people. However, the others might not be so peaceful in the future, Yuan Tianxing said as he looked at Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao nodded, but she had already expected this situation. His expression didn't change much as he said, "There's nothing we can do about it, but it seems that they aren't very willing to come here. I don't think the next batch will come so soon." Everyone nodded in agreement. After all, their base had just been built, the system wasn't mature yet, and they didn't have enough people. It didn't seem safe or reliable, so it was better to go to Haicheng or the Huaxia base. Anyway, the situation at the Huaxia base had improved, and it wouldn't be long before the zombies outside the city were cleared out. At this time, the Huaxia base's zombie antidote came in handy. The human base's wall is almost complete. When the time comes, we will move out of the hotel and stay on the other side. We stayed in that hotel before, so don't arrange for people to stay there. Tear it down and rebuild it. Expand the underground granary. At this time, Lin Xiao looked at Yuan Tianxing and said. Yuan Tianxing wrote and drew on the notebook, then nodded. Okay. Yuan Tianxing, Lin Feng, and Chen Yuding handled the affairs of the human base very well. After Lin Xiao looked at the planning materials, other than adding some opinions, there were no other problems. On the other hand, Lu Jun's planning base was busy because the first batch of grain seeds and seedlings that Lu Tianyi cultivated in the space was successfully brought out and then planted in the sweet potato field. Lin Xiao put the zombies into the space, then let Yuan Tianxing recruit people to work at the planting base. The management side was still left to Lu Jun and Lu Tianyi to manage the agriculture side. The two of them were the first and second minister respectively. In any case, Lu Tianyi still looked like a human, and his eyes were black and white. Lu Jun either wore sunglasses or a pair of contact lenses to hide the black in his eyes. Because the group of zombies that had been with Lin Xiao for the longest time, their faces had basically lost the characteristics of zombies. Except for the pale face and the black in their eyes, they looked like humans after wearing clean clothes. The meeting lasted for 2 hours. After giving out the orders, Zhang Yichen went to the office. Lin Xiao waved his hand to everyone. Okay, let's stop here for today. Everyone immediately tidied up the things on the table, stood up, and took the cups and documents out. Lin Xiao was the last one to stand up. She didn't need to tidy up the things. As her assistant, Shun Yuzhen would automatically help her put them away. However, just as she stood up and walked a few steps, she suddenly felt dizzy. Lin Xiao only felt that her whole body suddenly became heavy, and she almost fell to the ground. She swayed a bit, raised her hand to support her forehead, and leaned against the back of the chair next to her. Leader, Shun Yuzhen, who was tidying up, saw Lin Xiao's body swayed a bit, and when she hit the chair next to her, she was startled. She quickly threw the documents in her hand and quickly walked to Lin Xiao's side. Leader, what's wrong with you? Shun Yuzhen's voice was hoarse, but also a bit sharp. Her voice made Lin Xiao feel a bit uncomfortable. Lin Xiao held her forehead, tightly knitted her eyebrows, and then took a deep breath before slowly standing up. I'm fine now. Asked Duan want to go inform Lin how and asked him to prepare in advance. I'll go check it out later, Lin Xiao said to Shun Yuzhen after he straightened his body and waited for his head to clear up. Yes, Shun Yuzhen responded, and while looking at Lin Xiao worriedly, she quickly retreated to the door of the conference hall. She said a few words to Duan Wan, who was outside the door. Duan Wan's originally expressionless face was slightly surprised after hearing her words, and stretched her head in to look at Lin Xiao. She saw that Lin Xiao was tightly frowning and stood motionless beside the table with her eyes closed, and indeed looked a bit uncomfortable. Quickly send someone over to inform him, Shen Yuzhen said to Duan Wan. Duan Wan then nodded and sent someone to inform Lin Hao. Chapter 827. When Lin Xiao recovered, she discovered that although the dizziness in her head had lessened, she could feel the energy from the zombie nucleus continuously leaking out. That's right, the energy was leaking. Lin Xiao couldn't control it even if he wanted to, nor could he take it back even if he wanted to. Then she felt the energy flow down her spine from the back of her waist to the front, and finally into her lower abdomen. Lin Xiao was startled because the energy finally flowed into Little Man's location. She felt like Little Man was absorbing the energy of the crystal nucleus on her stomach. What was going on? Did Little Man wake up? In the past, when she absorbed energy, Little Man was always awake. She had never absorbed energy while asleep. What was going on now? Lin Xiao was at a loss, worried, and afraid. She didn't know what was going on, so she was at a loss. She was also worried that something had happened to Little Man that caused her to directly absorb her energy like this. What do you think? Can you walk? After Duan Wan sent someone out, she immediately turned around and walked in. She looked at Lin Xiao worriedly and unconsciously reached out to support her. Lin Xiao opened his eyes and calmly looked at his stomach, saying, "I'm fine for now." She took a deep breath and did not let the two people beside her support her. Instead, she gently lifted her feet and walked out. Although she was still a little dizzy now, she didn't do anything else other than being caught off guard by the previous attack. It was just that the energy was now flowing backwards. Although he didn't feel anything, if this continued, would it be harmful to Little Man? Or would something happen if he tried to stop them? Thinking that it was related to Young Man, Lin Xiao became a little anxious. However, she still had to force herself to calm down. The medical center was not far from the government building. It would only take a few minutes to get there. When Lin Xiao walked into the hospital with her heart in her mouth, Lin Hao just ran out and saw her. "What's wrong? What's the situation?" Lin Hao asked her with a grave expression. "Let's talk inside." Lin Xiao took a deep breath and walked into his consulting room without stopping. After a few minutes, Lin Xiao still felt that Little Man's body was absorbing her energy, and she didn't see any difference in other parts of her body. After entering the consulting room, except for Lin Xiao and Lin Hao, everyone else was waiting outside the door. Lin Hao then continued to ask her, "What's going on? Do you feel uncomfortable anywhere?" "She's absorbing my ability energy. I can't control my current ability. Now the energy is leaking out from my head and into here. I don't feel anything else." Lin Xiao lowered his head and looked at his abdomen. Lin Hao frowned slightly and thought for a moment. Then he turned to open another door and let her in. "Go in and lie on the bed first. I'll give you a checkup." Lin Xiao walked in and saw a small bed with various medical equipment beside it. She lay down on the bed, feeling uneasy and uneasy. After Lin Hao walked in with gloves on, he closed the door and saw Lin Xiao frowning. He comforted her and said, "Sister, relax. If there's no discomfort, there shouldn't be a big problem. Don't be so nervous, relax." Lin Xiao subconsciously took a deep breath, but she couldn't take an air. This action was just a habit of being human, and it could also be considered as a psychological hint. Lin Hao walked to her bedside, lifted the clothes on her lower abdomen, and pulled down her pants. Looking at the already bulging belly, he put a palm on it and gently pressed it. The ability energy in Lin Xiao's body was very strong. Lin Hao felt a rolling hot feeling when he touched it. After touching it a few times and finding that there was nothing unusual, he pulled over the equipment next to him and shone it on Lin Xiao's belly. "Has this happened before?" Lin Hao asked as he examined her. Lin Xiao shook her head. "No, this is the first time. The most serious reaction just now was when I almost fainted. It's fine now. It's just that the feeling of energy being extracted made my head swell and dizzy, but my stomach didn't have any reaction. It's just like before when she absorbed energy, but this time she suddenly started to absorb mine." She didn't even say anything. Lin Hao's expression was a bit solemn, but his hands didn't stop moving. After a while, he stopped and lowered his head, his expression deep in thought. How is it? Is there a problem? Lin Xiao asked him nervously. Lin Hao raised his head and looked at her. There's no big problem. The little guy's situation is very normal. As he said that, he thought of something and asked her, is she absorbing a lot of your energy now? Lin Xiao shook her head. Not much, about 1% of it. She hasn't stopped since just now. At this level of absorption, Lin Xiao felt that in less than 3 months, her energy would be exhausted. Why don't you stay here and observe for a few days? You can also try to see if you can absorb other energy cores in this situation. This way, you can at least maintain the child's sustenance. Lin Hao thought about it and suddenly said this. Sustenance? Lin Xiao was stunned when she heard this word and looked at Lin Hao hesitantly. Lin Hao said expressionlessly, normally, when a child grows to this level, they will start to absorb nutrients from their mother's body. However, your body is a bit special. Normal people don't have nutrients, so the child automatically chose your energy source. I reckon that no matter what you give her to absorb now, she won't be able to absorb it. Lin Hao also knew that previously, Lin Xiao would directly stick the energy core outside her belly and let the child absorb it, providing the energy and nutrients that the little baby needed. Lin Xiao looked at him blankly and asked, is that so? Lin Hao didn't dare to make any guarantees. He said, I'm not too sure, it's just a guess. We still need to observe for a while to be sure, so you can stay here for a few days. I'll go arrange a ward for you. Lin Xiao heard that he didn't dare to make any guarantees, but seeing his expression, she felt much more at ease. She knew her brother well. If he really didn't have any confidence, he wouldn't be so calm. Okay then, I understand. She nodded. Soon, Lin Hao arranged a quiet and clean ward for Lin Xiao. The news that Lin Xiao was suddenly admitted to the hospital spread quickly. The first person to rush into the ward was Mrs. Lin. Then, Lin Wenwen, Yuan Tianxing, and the others. As soon as they entered, Lin Feng and his wife followed. They knew that there was only a small problem with Lin Xiao's body, but they hadn't found out the cause yet. Everyone was slightly relieved. Yuan Tianxing didn't know about Lin Xiao's pregnancy, but he was still worried that something was wrong with Lin Xiao's body. Although he had already decided to give up on Lin Xiao, he couldn't help but pay attention to her, care about her, and care about her. After all, she was someone who had been in his heart for so many years. He couldn't just give up on her. Chapter 828. Leader, Miss Liu is hospitalized. When Xiao Liqing received the news that Lin Xiao was hospitalized, he immediately reported to Wu Chengyue the next day. Wu Chengyue's smiling face immediately sank. He asked calmly, what's going on? Is it serious? He walked to the office while talking. He just finished a meeting with other leaders and heard the news as soon as he came out. He couldn't help but be a little stunned. Logically speaking, the female zombie's body was no longer a normal human body. Even if there was a problem, the hospital couldn't cure it. Was there a problem with the child? Thinking of this, Wu Chengyue's heart suddenly jumped, but he still kept his calm. He didn't show it on the surface. There seems to be no big problem, but I heard that she needs to stay in the hospital for a few days for observation. Xiao Liqing also felt strange. A lot of senior cadres in the base also knew their leader's identity, saying that she was not feeling well and staying in the hospital for observation was probably just for outsiders to see. Could it be that their leader was experimenting with zombies? Because Lin Xiao's identity was indeed special, Xiao Liqing didn't get enough detailed information. But knowing that she was hospitalized, this matter wasn't so secretive. Hearing Xiao Liqing said that he needed to observe her for a few days, Wu Chengyue felt that his intuition was right. Get ready. I'm going to take Ling Ling to have a look. Let's go now. Wu Chengyue's brows furrowed slightly. Understood. Xiao Liqing immediately turned and left to make the arrangements. At this time in the base, Lin Xiao was lying on a hospital bed because after a day, the flow of her energy into her belly became less from the original 1% to 3%, and the situation also stabilized. Other than her energy flowing into her stomach, Lin Xiao's other body parts were fine, and there were no abnormalities. Also, she could control her ability now. But Lin Hao told her that she couldn't stop Little Man from absorbing energy. It would affect her development. Looks like the situation has stabilized, but I don't know how long it takes for her to absorb the energy. Maybe a few days, maybe a few months. Lin Hao took the medical record and wrote the information while talking to the other people in the room. In addition to Lin Xiao, Lin Wenwen and Mrs. Lin were also in the ward. Will it hurt Big Sister's body? Lin Wenwen was still a little worried. She had unconsciously asked this question several times. Big Sister doesn't seem to be in any discomfort at the moment, so there shouldn't be any harm, but I'm not sure about the future. After all, this is the first time we've heard of her situation. We don't know how she will react after that. Lin Hao said with a sigh. He had been telling his family about his speculations in a positive direction so that they would feel more at ease. However, he was also prepared for the worst. He had discussed this with Lin Xiao. At the very least, she had to be mentally prepared. It's okay. Little Man is so smart. She won't let anything happen to herself or me. Lin Xiao saw the worry in Lin Wenwen and her mother's eyes, and her heart warmed. He smiled and comforted them. Lin Luoran knows that Mrs. Lin has gradually accepted who she is now. In the beginning, Mrs. Lin didn't show it, but when she saw Lin Luoran's strange face, she felt a little uncomfortable. In fact, Mrs. Lin has gradually accepted Lin Luoran's current appearance and body since she is so worried about her. At night, when there was no one in the ward, Lin Xiao would take out a zombie core and hold it in his palm to absorb it. Lin Luoran's zombie core was still the same. As long as it was in a saturated state, it couldn't absorb any more energy. However, she couldn't break through this saturated state. That is to say, if she didn't break through this state, she would never be able to become a level 8 zombie emperor. The rest of the zombies were released by Lin Xiao, leaving only Mo Yin, the female zombie, and the 3 troublemakers in the space. Mo Yin was sitting in his room. He had been here for a few days. There was no day or night in this space, but there was a watch. Therefore, he still had a sense of time. These days, he didn't know if it was because of the broken zombie core, but he always felt hungry. He wanted to eat meat. Every time he had this idea, Mo Yin would think of the hearts of the living people he had eaten, fresh and sweet. However, in addition to zombies, there were also mutant animals on the other side of the lake. He didn't have any appetite for them. The only thing that could suppress his appetite was the water here. Mo Yin also found out that the water he used in this place was the water from the lake that gave off a sweet aroma. However, there was a terrifying pressure in the lake that made him refuse to go near it. In fact, Mo Yin had smelled this smell from Lin Xiao. The female zombie leader's breath was very strange. It had the fragrance of the lake, but it was mixed with another strange smell. It made people want to get close to her, but they didn't dare to. Staying in this space and doing nothing, Lin Xiao released the other zombies again. Every day, Mo Yin would sit by the window and stare at the zombie dogs and mutant mushrooms being chased by a huge black snake. Or he would walk around the vegetable field downstairs. Or he would stand a few meters away from the lake for a few hours. The female zombie was also inseparable from him, using her ability to heal him every day. Lin Xiao didn't know if it was intentional, but the female zombie's healing effect in the space had increased a lot. However, the recovery of Mo Yin's zombie core was still very slow. Roar dash! I can absorb the energy in the water. The female zombie stood behind Mo Yin, looking at the lake 5 meters away. She suddenly said to Mo Yin. Mo Yin turned to look at her and nodded. He knew that there was a strong energy in the water. He had drunk the water in the past few days, so of course he could feel the energy in the water and he could absorb it. Hearing what the female zombie said, he guessed that any zombie could absorb the energy in the water. However, he didn't dare to go into the lake, so the female zombie was even more afraid. The female zombie didn't say anything. She didn't mean anything by saying that. He was just telling Mo Yin about his discovery. Mo Yin turned around and walked towards the direction of the building. The female zombie quietly followed behind him. On the other side, Lu Tong started to cause trouble again. Recently, he had been keeping an eye on Yuan Tianxing's movements. He found that Yuan Tianxing would go to the hospital in the afternoon for the past 2 days. He didn't know who he was going to see. With his status, he didn't have the qualifications to know about Lin Xiao's hospitalization. So when he saw Yuan Tianxing go to the hospital, he felt strange. He wanted to follow him, but he found that there were soldiers guarding the place not long after. He didn't rush forward, but looked around to see if there was anyone else going in. Sure enough, after observing for a while, he found that ordinary people couldn't enter the place that the soldiers were guarding. Chapter 829. Since he couldn't get close, he would just wait outside. Anyway, his purpose wasn't to go in and see anyone. Yuan Tianxing led his men toward the entrance of the medical camp. However, when they turned a corner, a figure suddenly appeared in front of them. Clearly, the other party wasn't looking at them either. Instead, he turned his head to look at the other side. Yuan Tianxing couldn't stop himself in time and immediately knocked her away. Be careful. Fortunately, Yuan Tianxing reacted quickly and pulled the person who was about to fall back after bumping into him. Are you all right? He asked, looking at her. This was a handsome young man with a thin body and thin clothes. His face was still a little pale, and his lips were also a little colorless. It seemed that his body wasn't too good. Furthermore, there was a piece of cloth on his head. It seemed like he was injured. His face looked familiar, as if he had seen him somewhere before. Vice leader. I'm sorry, I'm fine. Lu Tong was a little dizzy from the collision. When she came back to her senses, she was stunned to see Yuan Tianxing. He immediately said in a timid manner. Yuan Tianxing gently loosened his grip on his arm, smiled at him, and asked with concern, I'm sorry to bump into you. Are you really okay? I see that your head is still injured. Don't force yourself. Lu Tong quickly shook his head and said in a panic, I'm really fine. Thank you, Deputy Leader. Well, I didn't look where I was walking and bumped into you. Sorry. I'm sorry. Looking at the young man's frightened and flustered look, Yuan Tianxing maintained a smile on his face and said gently, It's all right. I'm not looking at the road. Why do I feel like I've seen you somewhere? As he spoke, his expression was a little puzzled and curious. Lu Tong felt a flash of joy in his heart, but he pretended to be embarrassed and said, That. Maybe it's because I have a common face. Well, if there's nothing else, can I leave? As he spoke, his expression became cautious, and his eyes occasionally looked in the direction of the door. Oh, sure. But are you really okay? When Yuan Tianxing saw his expression, he felt that the other party seemed to be very afraid of him. It seemed that this person was a little timid. Like a bunny. It's fine. Then, I'll take my leave first. See you, Vice Leader. Lu Tong shook his head, turned around, and immediately moved to the side. Then, he jogged away without looking back. When his back was facing Yuan Tianxing and the others, the corners of his mouth had already curled up into a smug smile. I feel like I've seen him somewhere before. Yuan Tianxing muttered with a frown. Deputy Leader, didn't you save a worker who almost fell off the shelf when you went to the city wall construction site last time? He's the one who was pulling the person who was about to fall. Lu Junjie, who was behind Yuan Tianxing, suddenly stepped forward and said. Yuan Tianxing's eyes lit up, and he said in realization, Oh, right. So was him. No wonder he looked familiar. Let's go. Yeah. Send someone to follow him and see if there's anything wrong with his body. It wouldn't be good if I hit him just now. The other party looked so weak that he was worried that he might have injured him. Yes. Lu Junjie nodded. After some thought, he added, Deputy Commander, he's also a spatial ability user, even though he's only level 3. Yuan Tianxing was slightly taken aback, and his footsteps paused for a moment before he continued walking. He asked as he walked, Oh, spatial ability? Currently, there are only 2 spatial ability users in our base. He's the one who came in from the second batch, right? What's his name again? After some thought, he felt that something was wrong. He's a spatial ability user? Then why would he go to the construction site to do heavy work? He should have an allowance. And what's with the injury on his head? Go and check it out. Spatial ability users were protected resources. Although their base had just been built, it was more than enough to support a spatial ability user. Why would he go to the construction site to do heavy work? And that injury. Thinking of this, Yuan Tianqing frowned. The gentle aura around him faded slightly. Yes. Lu Junjie replied again. Lin Wenwen and Long Qingying watched this scene from afar. They had seen it from just now. Lu Tong had been waiting at the corner for a long time. When she heard Yuan Tianqing and the others' footsteps, she pretended to casually walk out. After talking to Lin Xiao, she decided to do as Lin Xiao said. She would just watch from the side and not interfere. She wanted to see if Lu Tong really had the ability to drug Yuan Tianqing. Do you think it's possible for him to drug brother Tianqing? Lin Wenwen suddenly asked. I don't know, but now he has successfully attracted the deputy leader's attention. Are you not going to interfere? Long Qingying said expressionlessly. I want to confirm one thing. Let's ignore him for now. Let's see if he can do that. Lin Wenwen said with an ambiguous look. That step? Which step? Long Qingying finally showed some curiosity. Lin Wenwen came back to his senses and shook his head. No, let's wait and see. This Lu Tong is very ambitious. On the other side, Lu Tong obviously wouldn't just leave like that. He pretended to be brave in front of Yuan Tianqing, but after walking for a distance, he suddenly raised his hand to cover his forehead and leaned against the wall. After a few steps, he fell to the ground softly along the wall. The people around saw him and immediately ran over to check on him. Lei Yao, who was sent by Lu Junjie to follow him, quickly ran over. Soon, the fainted Lu Tong was sent to the emergency room. On the other side, Lin Xiao was sitting on the bed, reading a document. At that moment, Shen Yuzhen walked in. Leader, the show you mentioned is about to start. Shen Yuzhen closed the door and walked to her bedside with a smile. Lin Xiao looked up at her indifferently, then looked down at the document again. Oh, where is the show? This Lu Tong pretended to bump into Deputy Leader Yuan in the hall. Then he fainted after a few steps, Shen Yuzhen said with a smile. Lin Xiao asked her to send someone to watch the people Lin Wenwen was watching, and they found Lu Tong. Then, they looked down and found that Lu Tong was staring at Deputy Leader Yuan. In addition to Lin Wenwen and Long Qingying, the people sent by Lin Xiao had also seen him standing guard at the corner. That was why Shen Yuzhen said it was an act. What was Yuan Tianqing's reaction? Lin Xiao asked casually. Deputy Leader Yuan didn't seem to notice anything, but he started to pay attention to this Lu Tong. He sent someone to investigate him. Shen Yuzhen couldn't help but sigh at Lu Tong's methods and his sickly look. Thinking about Yuan Tianqing's personality, it was indeed easy to attract his attention. Chapter 830. While Lu Tong was working, he didn't know how many people were watching his every move. When he woke up in the ward, he saw Yuan Tianqing sitting on the sofa. Ahem, Lu Tong coughed softly. Yuan Tianqing immediately looked up. You're awake? How do you feel? Does your head still hurt? Yuan Tianqing put down the documents in his hand, stood up, and walked to his side with a faint look of concern on his handsome face. I'm fine. Lu Tong's voice was a little hoarse. In fact, he deliberately suppressed his voice to make it sound. Yuan Tianqing poured a glass of water from the side and helped him up. Drink some water first. Your body is very weak. Don't overwork yourself. You're a space ability user. The base will give you an allowance. You don't need to work at the construction site anymore. Lu Tong didn't take the glass of water. Instead, he drank the water in the glass and shook his head. It's not enough. I want to move out and live alone, but I still need a lot of points. As he spoke, he lowered his head somewhat unnaturally, not daring to look Yuan Tianqing in the eyes. Lu Tong knew that if he said this now, it would only make Yuan Tianqing feel that he had to say this under the other party's questioning. It wasn't what he wanted to say. He knew that if he said this, Yuan Tianqing might directly arrange a room for him, but he couldn't let the other party know his true thoughts. Because he was a space ability user, a rare resource. Just like water ability users, they were given preferential treatment in every base. You want to live alone? That's easy. There are a lot of houses in the base anyway, and you're a space ability user. In order to ensure your safety, it's time for you to live somewhere else. Yuan Tianqing had a gentle smile on his face. He put the glass aside and comforted Lu Tong. Lu Tong raised his head and his eyes lit up. He looked very surprised, but soon he lowered his head again. No, but I want to use my own ability to find a house to live in. Thank you, Deputy Leader. I appreciate your kindness. He was clearly very happy in his heart, but he still pretended to be very stubborn and refused. Yuan Tianxing heard this and looked at the other person in the room. But look at you now. You should take a good rest. If your body isn't good, how will you go out with the army to collect supplies in the future? Du Yuanxing said to him with a serious expression. Du Yuanxing originally had business to talk to Yuan Tianxing, but he didn't expect to hear about this. The moment he entered, he realized that it was a familiar face. Well, he decided not to leave. Also, what happened to your injury? Chun Hao and the others are already dead, so there shouldn't be anyone else who's going to cause trouble for you anymore, right? Who did you offend this time? Du Yuanxing looked at the bandage on his head and frowned. I don't know either. When I was walking on the road that day, I suddenly felt a heavy blow to my head. Then, after a wave of pain, I fainted. I don't know who hit me. Lu Tong had a submissive look on his face, which was different from when Du Yuanxing had seen him before. Du Yuanxing looked at him with a puzzled frown. This Lu Tong wasn't like this when they brought him for interrogation. Why did he look like he was afraid? He looked at Lu Tianxing on the other side of the room and was confused. He felt that something was wrong. It's my fault this time. I accidentally bumped into a wounded person like you. Rest well. When you're discharged, I'll treat you to a meal as an apology. Don't worry about the house. I'll help you arrange it. Yuan Tianxing said to him, then said to Du Yuanxing, Yuanxing, you go and arrange the house. Okay. Du Yuanxing nodded. Yuan Tianxing smiled gently at Lu Tong and said, You rest first. I still have work to do. I'm sorry that I've delayed you, Deputy Leader. Please go. Lu Tong had already sat up and said to Yuan Tianxing with embarrassment when he heard that. There was an apologetic smile on his face, which made people feel that this young man had a good upbringing. After the two of them left, Lu Tong's apologetic smile turned into a smug one. His plan had finally progressed smoothly, and the other party really easily helped him settle the matter of the house and even invited him to a meal. This meal came at the right time. He was thinking about how to have a meal with the other party so that he could use the medicine on him. Otherwise, if this man kept eating in his office, he wouldn't know how to make a move. Of course, he didn't get close to Yuan Tianxing just for the house. He needed to rely on Yuan Tianxing. In order to make the other party be willing to let him rely on him, he had to make him do something to make the other party feel guilty. This way, it would be easy for him to get whatever he wanted in the future. On the other side, Lu Tong was thinking about how he could live a carefree life after his plan succeeded. On the other side, Yuan Tianxing said to Du Yuanxing, You said that the people he offended are all dead? Then how did he get injured this time? Du Yuanxing said in a daze. They followed a group of people from the Netherworld King's base, but he had a handle on one of them. And this information happened to be related to Deputy Leader Lin's wife. So that person was worried that Lu Tong would leak this information after coming here. So he planned to frame him and then kill him. I didn't expect that person to be so stupid to actually have ideas on Xiao Lu and Tong Tong. After clarifying the relationship between Lu Tong and Chun Hao, Du Yuanxing continued, This group of people has already been dealt with. If anyone else still harbors a grudge against him, I'm sure they'll be able to find him. If there are still people who hate him, it might be the ordinary people who came with him. He was referring to Wang Jian and the others. However, Du Yuanxing quickly said, But that day the people around didn't see who attacked him, nor did they see anyone suspicious in the surroundings. Yuan Tianxing rubbed his chin as he walked. That's strange. At this time, a group of people appeared outside the base. This group of people openly stopped in the middle of the road outside the zombie line of defense, then seemed to be waiting for something. Do you think he sent people out or zombies out? A baby-faced girl standing at the front asked. The expressionless, handsome young man beside her said lightly, I don't know. Sitting next to the handsome young man was a huge black dog. Even though it was sitting down, its head was almost the same height as the baby-faced girl who was 5 meters tall. When it stood up, it was also taller than her waist. Behind the two people and the dog stood a few people in white uniforms with their heads and faces covered with bandages. Chapter 831. Lei Chung and Yi Ingyue didn't wait long outside the base before two zombies, one old and one young, came. Looking at the crowd of zombies slowly separating, and the old man and the child came out, Lei Chung turned his head and looked at the weirdly dressed man beside him. There was a trace of inquiry in his eyes. The man nodded. People from Qingshan base? Old Guo pushed the glasses on his face, treating them like his reading glasses. Although it was a question, the meaning was obvious. Huh? Do you know we are from Qingshan base? Ying Yue's big eyes were a little surprised. She didn't know that Old Guo was a zombie. Instead, he took a few more glances at the kid wearing a mask and glasses next to Old Guo. Because you're not people from our base. Apart from our base, only people from your base would bring zombies with them. And you came to our base so blatantly. Old Mingua snorted and glanced at the silent people beside them with a sneer. Yi Ingyue was stunned. She didn't know how to answer and looked at Lei Chung. We want to make a deal with your base? I don't know if your leader is willing. Can you lead us to see her? Lei Cheng's face was expressionless, but his eyes were a little cold. His whole body's aura was also cold. The old man nodded, his hands crossed on a crutch in front of him. He didn't immediately answer his request. He just quietly looked at the other side. Lei Chung also quietly looked at the old man. Although he couldn't see the old man's eyes, the aura of the two people were secretly confronting each other. Yi Ingyue blankly looked back and forth between the two people. At this time, the old man nodded and said, "Then come in." Then he turned around and walked inside with the child. Lei Chung and Yi Ingyue looked at each other, immediately turned around, and got into the car behind. They followed the old man and the child inside. At this time, outside the entrance on the other side of the base, another group of people also reached the periphery of the zombies' defense line. But these people didn't wait like Lei Chung and the others, but directly drove over. The zombies saw their car driving over. After smelling the familiar smell of the car, they automatically spread out to make a way. After the car drove over, it automatically blocked back. On both sides of Wu Qingyue's rearview mirror hung a small grass ball. Inside the grass ball was Lin Xiao's dried blood. Lin Xiao, who was wearing a loose hospital gown, sat on a chair in the ward and read the documents. Once she finished reading, she would sign her name. If there was a problem, he would tick it off and put on the other side. It was as if the ward was his office. After a while, someone knocked on the door. Shin Yuzhen pushed open the door and entered. Leader Wu of Ocean City is here. As he spoke, footsteps could be heard coming from outside the door. Then, Wu Qingyue walked in with a smile on his handsome face, holding Wu Yueling's hand. As soon as Wu Yueling saw Lin Xiao sitting on the chair, she immediately broke free from her papa's hand and ran towards Lin Xiao happily. After they came in, Shin Yuzhen closed the door for them. What's going on? Are there any sick zombies? Wu Qingyue walked over and saw that Lin Xiao didn't intend to stand up from the chair. He sat on the chair opposite her. What's up? Lin Xiao looked at Wu Yueling, who ran to her leg. She stopped what she was doing and reached out to pinch her red cheeks. She glanced at Wu Qingyue indifferently. Isn't it obvious? I care about you. Wu Qingyue stared at her face with a smile, and then his eyes intentionally or unintentionally swept to her belly below. This female zombie's originally pale and bloodless face couldn't be seen, and her eyes were like a normal person's. Her eyes were sharp, and she didn't look weak. Although he didn't know what would happen when a zombie became weak, he didn't see anything wrong with this female zombie's calm eyes. Obviously, it wasn't a big problem. It doesn't seem to be a big problem, but why do you continue to stay here? He thoughtfully moved his eyes to the position of the other party's abdomen. It was blocked by the loose hospital gown, so he couldn't see anything. Being stared at by Wu Qingyue clearly, Lin Xiao's expression was calm, but her mouth coldly replied, "It has nothing to do with you, Leader Wu." Wu Qingyue smiled and squinted his eyes. The temperature of his expression dropped slightly. Don't always say it has nothing to do with me. I am the child's father. You are the child's mother. How can I not care about you? Lin Xiao sneered, looked at him and said, "If it wasn't for this child, you wouldn't even be staring at me. In the end, you just want this child." "No." Wu Qingyue saw the sneer on her face and heard what she said. He subconsciously denied it in his heart. Lin Xiao's words made him feel very uncomfortable, but also a little wronged. He clearly didn't think so, but she said so. Was he that kind of person in her heart? The smile on Wu Qingyue's face disappeared, and he stared at her expressionlessly. "Have you always seen me like this? Or do you think I have other intentions when I chase you?" Lin Xiao slightly raised her chin, and the sneer on the corner of her mouth didn't disappear. "Isn't it? From the very beginning, shouldn't you have hated me the most?" She didn't like Wu Qingyue's sudden proposal and pursuit of her for 2 months, but she didn't believe that he would like her. The original owner of this body used to be the type that people didn't like, and he even did that kind of thing to him before he died. He didn't look like he was sick in the head, so how could he like her? He did have ulterior motives in the beginning. At that time, he considered the mentality of being responsible for the child in her belly, and also the role of this female zombie, to Lingling. That was why he made that decision. But after getting to know each other for a long time, the scene of that day flashed in his mind from time to time. It made him slowly have a strange feeling in his heart, and then this feeling became more and more difficult to control. He couldn't help but want to know about this female zombie, want to know her movements, and think about her body and her pair of sharp but captivating eyes. He woke up some time ago, and he was obsessed with her. He didn't care if this female zombie rejected him before. But now, when the other party said such words to him, Wu Qingyue had a faint feeling of grievance and depression in his heart. As he thought about it, his expression became a little gloomy. Wu Qingyue tightly stared at her eyes. "You said it yourself, that was in the beginning. It's different now. You should understand this." Looking at Wu Qingyue's serious face, Lin Xiao's heart also sank. She slightly frowned and said, "Did you come here to quarrel with me?" "Of course not." Wu Qingyue was stunned, and then the expression on his face disappeared. At this time, Wu Yueling lightly patted Lin Xiao's leg and looked up at her with watery eyes. Chapter 832. Wu Qingyue took a deep breath and exhaled. Then, he put on a warm smile and said, "I came to see if you're feeling unwell, but you don't seem to have any major problems. If I'm not wrong, the problem should be with the child." He paused, and before Lin Xiao could speak, he said, "As the child's father, I think I have the right to know about the child's condition." Lin Xiao turned to look outside the door. The room was soundproof, so she wasn't worried that her conversation with Wu Qingyue would be overheard by the guards outside. "She's fine," Lin Xiao said calmly. Just like he said, as the child's father, he had the right to know about the child's condition. Even if the child's soul might be the child of her and that scumbag, it was now her and Wu Qingyue's child. That was true. Fortunately, the child's bloodline had changed, even though she didn't like Wu Qingyue. But at least he was better than that scumbag Yang Jianhua. Just then, someone knocked on the door again. "Come in," Lin Xiao responded this time. The two of them looked at the door at the same time. Shen Yuzhen opened the door and said to Lin Xiao, "Leader, the deputy leader sent someone to report that someone from Qingshan Base is here and wants to make a deal with you. The deputy leader asked for your permission. Do you want to meet them?" Lin Xiao's expression froze. "Qingshan Base? A deal? What do they want from us?" Then he lowered his eyes and rubbed his chin, thinking about the other party's intentions. "Qingshan Base. I've always felt that Lan Lu has been looking at you in a strange way." Wu Qingyue had already returned to his usual smiling face, but his eyes seemed to be thinking about something. Lin Xiao glanced at him. She knew that Lan Lu already knew the secret of Qingshan Base, but she believed that Lan Lu wouldn't tell anyone. Wu Qingyue didn't know what she and Lan Lu were thinking. In his eyes, Lan Lu seemed to have approached her with unknown intentions. Arrange a place for them to stay and see them in a few days. Who came? Lin Xiao turned to Shen Yuzhen and asked. 5 people came, 1 man, 1 woman, and 3 strange people with covered heads and faces. I don't know if they're men or women. Plus a dog, Shen Yuzhen said with some hesitation. Okay, I got it. Go. Lin Xiao nodded. After Xin Yuzhen went out, Wu Chengyue continued to sit in the chair and looked at her silently. Lin Xiao turned her head and looked at him for a few seconds. Anything else? Wu Chengyue sighed and asked with a helpless smile, Tell me, what's going on with your body? Otherwise, why would you be hospitalized for observation? Lin Xiao retracted his gaze coldly. Didn't you already guess it? Wu Chengyue immediately stood up and wanted to walk over to Lin Xiao, but he hesitated. With an anxious look on his face, he asked, Really, what's the problem? Is it serious? Although he could guess that the situation was not that serious when he saw Lin Xiao's calm expression, he could not help but worry and want to know. Because her body was too special, it was different from normal people. If there were any abnormalities, the consequences would be unknown, so he didn't know whether it was good or bad. Don't worry, she's fine. I'm the one who's in trouble. Lin Xiao glanced at him indifferently and continued to read the document in his hand. Seeing her like this, Wu Qingyuan knew that she didn't want to say more. Suppressing the urgent thoughts in his heart, he sat back down with a blank expression. Lin Xiao raised her eyes and looked at him strangely. Still not leaving? Wu Qingyue decisively shook his head. The rascally attitude from before came out again. I'm not leaving, unless you tell me what's going on. Even if she didn't say it, he would still find out. And this female zombie seemed to have a close relationship with the doctor from the Lin family. Obviously, he should know something about her body's problem. Thinking of Lin Hao, Wu Chengyue immediately remembered that Lin Hao was a single man, and he was young, handsome, and had a good temperament. And a doctor. Doctors had a very high status in the apocalypse. Thinking of the scene of the young and handsome Lin Hao lifting the female zombie's clothes and checking her stomach, Wu Chengyue felt uncomfortable again. Looking at Wu Chengyue's expressionless face suddenly darkened. Lin Xiao unconsciously raised a finger to touch her chin. She looked at him with a curious expression. What the hell was this man thinking? On the other side, Yuan Tianxing received Lei Cheng and the others in the living room. After receiving the message from Xin Yuzhen, he smiled and said to Lei Cheng and the others, Our leader agreed to discuss the deal with you, but it's not convenient for her right now. You may need to wait for a few more days. No problem. No problem. We can also visit your base for a bit. Deputy Leader Yuan, you don't mind, right? Yi Yingwei stared with her big, watery eyes. She didn't mind waiting for a few more days. On the contrary, she seemed to be very interested in the new base. Of course not. Towards a beautiful and cute girl, Yuan Tianxing's smile was very gentle. He nodded and said, Then I'll send someone to take you to your place of residence. Saying that, Yuan Tianxing thoughtfully looked at the three guys with their heads and faces covered. A few days later, Lin Xiao's situation remained the same. Lin Hao looked left and right, but didn't see any abnormal reactions, so he let her leave the medical center. Pay attention to maintaining your energy. Don't cut off the energy supply. Lin Hao only reminded her of this point and didn't say anything else. Although the child absorbed very little energy now, it was possible that she would absorb more and more when she grew up. Lin Xiao nodded and agreed to his reminder. But even if Lin Hao didn't say it, she also knew that she couldn't cut off little man's energy source. Lin Hao held the examination information in his hand, then glanced at Wu Qingyuan next to him with a strange expression, and then looked at Lin Xiao. In the end, it turned into an expression of wanting to say something. This man suddenly appeared in his office with a cold face 3 days ago and asked him about Lin Xiao's situation. Lin Xiao's identity was special, and he thought that Lin Xiao wouldn't tell anyone else about the child other than the Lin family. However, as soon as this man appeared, he directly asked what happened to Lin Xiao's child, and his cold face carried a strong sense of hostility. Looking at the person who usually smiled like the spring breeze suddenly become cold, and with a strong sense of hostility in front of him, Lin Hao was very sensitive, and he smelled a strong sense of jealousy. Then, he suddenly discovered a truth. Okay, so this is the child's father. His sister was still hiding it, and in the end, this person came to the door himself. Looking at the jealousy and hostility in the other person's eyes, Lin Hao felt inexplicably refreshed. Then he remembered that the other person had eaten his sister's first time after changing her body, so the refreshment in his heart immediately turned into displeasure. Chapter 833. Thus, Wu Qingyue saw Lin Hao running to the female zombie's ward 5 times a day. Not only did he have a face full of concern, he even used the checkup to touch the female zombie. Wu Qingyue felt that he was about to explode. The smile on his face was getting harder and harder to maintain. As soon as he saw Lin Hao appear, his face would become gloomy. When Lin Hao saw his face, he was secretly pleased. Their faces were beaming with pride and contentment. Lin Xiao was sandwiched between the two. How could he not notice the change in the atmosphere of the two men? He rolled his eyes countless times in his heart. But Lin Xiao still had to go along with his little brother's act. Because she also wanted Wu Qingyue to continue to misunderstand, it would be best if he got so angry that he gave up on her. It would be even better if he thought that she wasn't a good woman. She smiled gently at Lin Hao and said, "Thank you, Dr. Lin. You're the best." Then she said the words Dr. Lin in a gentle and flirtatious tone, causing Lin Hao to shiver and his hair to stand up. But on the surface, he was still very calm and said with a smile, "No need to thank me. If you really want to thank me, why don't we have dinner together tonight? Since you've been discharged, we can celebrate." Although they often had dinner together, but these words sounded different to Wu Qingyue's ears. No, Wu Qingyue didn't even think about it and objected. But Lin Hao wasn't afraid of him at all. He looked at him with a sneer and said with ridicule in his eyes, "Oh? Why does leader Wu have to object? Although everyone knows that you're chasing our leader didn't agree to your pursuit. She doesn't need your permission to eat with whoever she wants." Wu Qingyue's face immediately became a bit ugly, but he had nothing to say. He stared at Lin Hao's smiling face with a gloomy expression, then looked at the female zombie's smiling face. She felt suffocated in her heart. She felt very uncomfortable, neither up nor down. "Okay, Leader Wu. Dr. Lin is right. This is my business." Lin Xiao also spoke at this time, helping his little brother to give Wu Qingyue a knowing blow. "I'll be waiting for Leader's feast tonight." Lin Hao curled the corner of his mouth and said, then turned to open the door and left. Although Shan Yuzhen and Duan Wan at the door maintained their expressionless faces, one of them was already laughing in her heart. The other felt helpless for Wu Qingyue. Although the two of them couldn't hear the conversation inside, they could guess something just by looking at the scene and the expressions of these people. Duan Wan knew Lin Xiao's real identity, so she immediately knew what kind of show they were putting on. Just by looking at the ashen face of the leader of Sea City, one could tell that the siblings were doing this on purpose. He suddenly felt sorry for this leader Wu. On the other hand, Shan Yuzhen really felt pity for her former leader. The woman he was pursuing was in a relationship with another man, and she even showed off in front of him. "My heart is so tired. Yes, I don't have a right to control who you eat with. You can do whatever you want." Wu Qingyue suppressed the anger in his heart and said coldly to Wu Yuezhen, "Lingling, let's go back." Wu Yueling looked at her papa's face and saw that he seemed to be very angry. Her little sweetheart was a little scared. She obediently walked to Wu Qingyue's side and raised her hand to hold Papa's hand. She helplessly turned her head and reluctantly looked at Lin Xiao. Although she didn't want to be separated from her zombie mommy, her daddy was angry now. She should go back with her daddy first. Lin Xiao smiled and waved to Wu Yueling, making a goodbye gesture. At dinner time, there was indeed only Lin Hao who came. Lin Xiao was a zombie, although she didn't eat human food now. But her cooking skills were still there, although she couldn't taste it. "Try this. I haven't made it for a long time. The seasoning is not good." Putting the last vegetable on the table, Lin Xiao said to Lin Hao, who was sitting at the table and eating with his chopsticks, "It's a little salty." Lin Hao picked up a chopstick and put it in his mouth, chewing, and said. Lin Xiao took a glass of water and sat opposite him, saying to him, "You told him about my situation?" Lin Hao looked up at her and nodded. Since he is the child's father, he does have the right to know about this. Although I don't expect him to help, I can't let him accidentally affect you and the child. Lin Xiao nodded and didn't say anything. Lin Hao drank a mouthful of soup, then looked at her and said, "Speaking of which, you too, you already did that. Why can he still act like nothing happened? Are you a fake zombie?" Lin Xiao rolled her eyes at him. "You want to find a female zombie to try? I'll help you." Lin Hao almost spat out the soup in his mouth and quickly shook his head. "No, no, no. I don't want to. I'm just curious. After all, how many zombies do you think are as fake as you?" Lin Xiao smiled slyly at him. "There are too few women now. I'm afraid you can't find one." Although she was just saying it, she didn't really dare to let Lin Hao find a zombie wife. Like Shen Yuzhen and Chen Yuding, they still didn't dare to touch hands. These days were really hard. Even if Shen Yuzhen could retract her nails, she could still hold hands. But kissing, these two didn't dare to cross this step. But what Lin Hao said was also right. Not every zombie's physique was like hers. If it wasn't for the energy in the lake, perhaps Wu Changyue wouldn't be able to live well now. "Sis, why don't you tell me how you guys, did it? Although it's not scientific, but maybe we can research in this direction." Lin Hao thought of this and looked at Lin Xiao with his eyes shining. "You want to research everything. Is my child not enough for you to research? You still want to research that? Or do you want to try it yourself?" Lin Xiao rolled her eyes at him and then changed the topic. "TSK, I'm serious with you. Can't you speak properly?" Lin Hao stared at her discontentedly. "Podash." Lin Xiao reached out and slapped his head. "What? Are you so interested in your sisters? Are you ashamed? Fuck. I'm clearly asking you seriously. You're the one who always uses this kind of dirty talk. Okay? If you don't tell me the process, how can I research it? If this matter can be solved, not only can I help Chen Yuding and his wife, maybe it will help you zombies in the future." Lin Hao was immediately angry after being slapped. In the end, he added, "Why don't you understand?" Lin Xiao just wanted to tease him, seeing that he was really angry at this time. He smiled and said, all right, I'll tell you. When we were at the bottom of the lake in my space, I guess it had something to do with the energy in the lake." Lin Hao held the chopsticks in one hand and the rice bowl in the other. After hearing this, he pondered for a while. He muttered, "In the water? Could it be that both of us can only do it in that kind of lake?" Lin Xiao nodded. "That might be the case." Chapter 834. No. Speaking of which, when did your relationship with him reach this stage? What's going on now? His sister was already pregnant, but she didn't want to accept him. Lin Hao felt that there was something going on between them. What kind of relationship has reached this stage? I don't have any feelings for him. It's just a business relationship. You know about this body. What he did before has nothing to do with me. Okay? Lin Xiao rolled her eyes. Huh? Then why are you with him? Are you just having sex? Lin Hao looked at her in confusion. Then he continued to stuff rice into his mouth. Eat your food. Why are you asking so many questions? Lin Xiao glared at him. Lin Hao lowered his head and ate quietly. I'm telling you, don't tell anyone else that he's the baby's father. Not even mom and brother. Lin Xiao warned him seriously. Oh, Lin Hao responded with a mouth full of rice. At this time, Lu Tong had moved to a new place. He hadn't tidied up his things yet. It was a suite with one bedroom, one living room, a bathroom, a kitchen, and a balcony. Although it was a little small, it had everything. If Lin Wenwen were to enter the bedroom, she would immediately recognize that the furnishings in the bedroom were the same as the room in the painting she had seen before. At this moment, Lu Tong was happily preparing the meal. The food was brought from the canteen because ordinary people couldn't cook in a place like this. The power supply in the base was still not enough, and not every household could use it. Even if it could be used, there was a time limit. He wasn't worried that Yuan Tianqing wouldn't come here, since he had promised him. As far as he knew, Yuan Tianqing was a man of his word. Lu Tong took out a few corpse cores from his collection and exchanged them for a few dishes. He didn't realize that Lin Wenwen was hiding in a window and watching his every move with a pair of binoculars. Her premonition was getting stronger and stronger. Thinking that Yuan Tianqing was going to have a meal with Lu Tong, She immediately felt that Yuan Tianqing wouldn't be able to finish the meal smoothly. Didn't you say that the deputy leader is treating him? Why are you in his room? Long Qingying looked at Lin Wenwen with a confused expression. Lin Wenwen shook his head. He didn't know what Lu Tong said to make Yuan Tianqing agree to come here. However, it was clear that his motives were not pure. Look, there's going to be a good show. Lin Wenwen sneered. Lu Tong's condition for Yuan Tianqing to eat at his house was that Yuan Tianqing had to offer a bottle of wine as an apology, and that Yuan Tianqing had to eat at his new house. Lu Tong would only accept Yuan Tianqing's apology after the celebration of moving into a new house. Since she kept saying that she didn't have any friends to celebrate with, Yuan Tianqing agreed without a second thought. After Lu Tong placed the dishes on the table, he placed 2 glasses of water on the 2 seats. Then, he openly poured the knockout drug that he got from Li Honglin into the glass opposite him and placed it on the table, waiting for Yuan Tianqing to drink it after he finished eating. As the vice leader, of course, he had to be careful with what he ate. However, Lu Tong had presented himself as a kind and upright person in front of Yuan Tianqing, so that Yuan Tianqing wouldn't think that he would do such a thing and wouldn't suspect that he had the guts to do so. After all, he looked so weak. There was nothing to guard against, right? After setting everything up, Lu Tong's mouth curved into a smile. However, he thought that after he knocked out Yuan Tianqing, he would have to be naked and let Yuan Tianqing press on top of him. The corners of his mouth immediately turned down, and a hint of disgust flashed in his eyes. On the other side, Lin Xiao chased Lin Hao away after he finished eating. Then, he listened to Xie Dong's report about Lu Tong. Even a matter of him getting the knockout drug from Li Honglin was clearly investigated. This Lu Tong is really evil, Lin Xiao said expressionlessly. Yuan Tianqing was heterosexual. He obviously had no interest in men, but the other party wanted to use this method to tie him down. If Lu Tong succeeded, Yuan Tianqing wouldn't feel good about it. Xie Dong stood straight next to her, and there was no expression on his tough face. Ever since he became a zombie, his face seemed to have lost the ability to change expressions, and he always had a straight face. Hearing Lin Xiao's words, he didn't say anything, but Shun Yuzhen, who was next to him, said, Miss Wenwen probably won't let Lu Tong succeed. Lin Xiao nodded and said, of course, Lu Tong could have targeted anyone, but why did he target Yuan Tianqing? Then, she said the same thing as Lin Wenwen. Now, let's wait for the show. Lu Tong didn't have to wait long before he heard footsteps and knocks on the door. You're here. Lu Tong opened the door with a refreshing smile and saw Yuan Tianqing standing at the door with his men. Yuan Tianqing stood straight at the door, and with a gentle smile on his handsome face, he walked in. How's this place? Is it okay? It's great. It's good enough to have a place to stay. Lu Tong smiled modestly, and then saw Lu Junjie, who was behind Yuan Tianqing, come in with a bottle of red wine, and even prepared 2 glasses. Lu Junjie put the wine bottle and glasses on the table, and looked at the dishes on the table without saying anything, then stood to the side without saying anything. Lu Tong looked at Lu Junjie a few times, and then led Yuan Tianqing to a seat. Then, he looked at Lu Junjie a few times, and wanted to say something, but stopped. Seeing his expression, Yuan Tianqing asked curiously, what's wrong? Lu Tong retracted his gaze, embarrassed, and said a little unnaturally, that, I'm not used to people standing next to me when I'm eating. Why don't you eat with us? Is that okay? As he spoke, he looked like he was going to get another set of chopsticks. Hey, no need. I'll ask him to wait outside. Yuan Tianqing hurriedly raised his hand to stop him, and then glanced at Lu Junjie. After all, most ordinary people were not used to people standing next to them when they were eating, and that would make them feel pressured. Lu Junjie hesitated for 2 seconds, and only turned to leave when he saw Yuan Tianqing nod. Then, he helped close the door. Only then did Lu Tong let out a sigh of relief, and in fact he was really relieved. Although he had already thought of how to get Yuan Tianqing's men to leave, he was not very confident. Now that he had successfully sent them away, he heaved a sigh of relief. You exchanged so many dishes. Don't tell me you've traded all your money away. Actually, you don't have to be so wasteful. Looking at the 4 dishes on the table, It was usually very difficult for ordinary people to eat. Yuan Tianxing sighed. How can I do that? Today is a celebration of my moving house. And I have to thank you. Of course I have to eat something good. Moreover, you brought wine. You can't not have dishes to go with it, right? Lu Tong smiled a little bashfully. Chapter 835. Yuan Tianxing looked at Lu Tong, who was smiling like a little animal, even though he didn't like her weak personality. Although he did not like his weak personality, he seemed to see a bit of strength in this weakness, which was why he did not dislike it. Moreover, he did bump into him, and the other party was already injured. Yuan Tianxing felt a little apologetic about this. Therefore, after knowing that the other party was a space arcanist, he thought that he would be a moving warehouse and a very precious resource if he could groom him in the future. Therefore, he immediately asked Yuanxing to arrange a new place for him. Moreover, he wanted to treat the other party to a good meal in the canteen as an apology. However, the other party said that he must have a good meal in his new home. Coincidentally, he wanted to have a meal with him, so he might as well go to his house. At first, Yuan Tianxing was not very willing, but when he saw the cautious, eager, and nervous look in the other party's eyes, he did not know why his heart suddenly softened, and he agreed. In the end, he thought about it and said that he would bring a bottle of wine over. Therefore, even though he was a little unwilling, he still came. All right, while the food is still warm, eat quickly. Congratulations on moving to your new home. Yuan Tianxing put aside the little bit of dissatisfaction in his heart and opened the bottle with a gentle smile on his face. He poured a third of the wine into the glass and handed it over. Thank you. Lu Tong smiled and nodded. He took the glass and clinked it with Yuan Tianxing. When he put the glass to his lips and drank, his eyelids were covered with a smile of success. Fortunately, he had been hiding his second arcana. Because this arcana was only at level 3, it was completely useless against Yuan Tianxing, who had already broken through to level 7. However, if he added some acting and manipulation, it would be a different story. If it was not because of his previous acting, which made the other party think that he was a weak person, if he created a little guilt and apology in the other party's heart, it would be easier for him to let his guard down. This way, he could release his second arcana bit to make the other party agree with him. Therefore, whether it was the careless Yuan Tianxing or Lin Xiao and Lin Wenwen who were watching Lu Tong, they did not expect Lu Tong to be hiding another arcana that no one knew about. Spirit Arcana. Lu Tong and Yuan Tianxing fell silent. After 2 glasses of wine, they started to talk more openly. You seem to be drunk. Don't drink anymore. Lu Tong's face was flushed and his eyes were misty. Yuan Tianxing tried to persuade him. How could it be? I've only drunk 2 cups. Let me tell you, when I followed them here, I was so weak that I was almost abandoned by them several times. If I didn't have something in my space, I wouldn't have come here alive. Lu Tong murmured. He sat steadily in his seat without moving, but his mouth kept talking. She seemed to be a little drunk when she talked about her past half-truths. Yuan Tianxing had always been a patient person, so he looked at him with a smile, eating the dishes on the table while listening to him continue. He believed that after this meal, no one would dare to cause trouble for Lu Tong in the future. In any case, he was someone who had a meal with the deputy leader. In the future, if anyone wanted to touch him, they would have to consider their own side first. An hour later, all the dishes on the table were finished. However, Lu Tong had no intention of stopping. He was still asking for wine. Yuan Tianxing could only find a glass of water for him. He looked left and right and saw the 2 glasses of water that Lu Tong had placed on the table. He picked up one of the glasses and passed it to him. Here's the wine you wanted. Drink it. Lu Tong took it without hesitation and was about to drink it. Suddenly, he stared blankly at Yuan Tianxing for a while and said, I'll drink. You have to drink too. Come, cheers. Cheers. It was obvious that he wouldn't drink the water if he didn't toast with him. It was useless to reason with a drunkard, so Yuan Tianxing sighed and picked up his wine glass as he wanted. However, just as he was about to clink his glass with Lu Tong's, Lu Tong pulled his glass back. No, That's not right. Why? Is mine white and yours red? Lu Tong stared at his glass with confusion in his eyes. Yuan Tianxing had no choice but to put down the glass in his hand. Then, he picked up the other glass and clinked it with Lu Tong's. Come, it's the same now. Then, he raised his head and gulped it down. He only wanted to let this guy drink the water in the glass as soon as possible and drag him to rest so that he could leave as soon as possible. After seeing him drink the cup of water, Lu Tong's eyes, which were originally hazy from being drunk, flashed imperceptibly before quickly disappearing. Then, he raised his head and drank the water to hide the excitement in his eyes. On the other side, Lin Wenwen held the binoculars and quietly watched the situation over here. After seeing the two of them drink a glass of water, the water, Lu Tong directly laid on the table and stopped moving. Yuan Tianxing stood up and walked to his side, then helped him to the bedroom. They're here. After the two of them went in, Lin Wenwen said with a gloomy expression. Long Qingying, who had been watching from the side, also understood what she was talking about. After the two of them went in, Yuan Tianxing, who was supposed to come out soon, didn't move at all. On the other hand, when Yuan Tianxing put Lu Tong down on the bed, Lu Tong might have accidentally hooked him down. The two of them fell on the bed together. Following that, Yuan Tianxing felt dizzy. He propped himself up on the bed and shook his head. However, the more he shook, the heavier his head became. Before he could figure out what was going on, his vision went black and he didn't know anything. Lu Tong was also lying down, but after a few minutes, he suddenly got up. He didn't look like he was floating when he walked, and his face was calm and tranquil. He looked at Yuan Tianxing for a few seconds, then bent over and pushed Yuan Tianxing's shoulder with force. He called out tentatively, Deputy Leader. Deputy Leader? Seeing that Yuan Tianxing didn't react at all, he immediately heaved a sigh of relief. That's good. When Yuan Tianxing woke up tomorrow and found himself naked on top of him, he would see what Yuan Tianxing, who was afraid of owing favors, would do. As he thought about it, he started to take off Yuan Tianxing's clothes. After that, he threw Yuan Tianxing on the bed and started to take off his own clothes. When his gaze swept over the other party's naked, slender, and strong body, his eyes showed a hint of disgust. But soon, he didn't care anymore. After taking off his clothes, he climbed onto the bed and was about to pull Yuan Tianxing down on top of him. Bang! Suddenly, the door was broken. Lu Tong was startled and turned his head abruptly. Chapter 836. You? Who are you? Why are you barging into my house? Lu Tong's eyes widened as he stared in disbelief at the group of people standing outside the door. Lin Wenwen stood at the door and looked at the naked Lu Tong on the bed. Although she was mentally prepared, she still felt like she was going to go blind. Thus, she quickly shifted her gaze to Yuan Tianxing, who was lying motionless next to him. She glanced at his round butt and blushed as she turned her face away. Ajia! Although she averted her gaze, she still immediately called out. Then she quickly pulled the expressionless Long Qingying to the side and let the wall block the unsightly scene in the room. Lu Tong's expression turned into one of panic after his initial disbelief. However, he had a psychic ability. He quickly calmed down and shouted, "Wait a minute! How dare you barge into my house?" He didn't look like he was caught doing something bad at all. He even calmly pulled the blanket over himself. While he was speaking, Lu Junjie had already walked in with quick steps. He walked to the bed and covered Yuan Tianxing's lower body with his clothes. Wei Jingxin and Xing Lu, who came in later, picked up the clothes and threw them at Lu Tong's face. "Put on your clothes." Although Lu Tong was panicking at the sight of so many people, he also felt very uncomfortable being naked. Thus, he picked up the clothes and put them on while thinking about what was going on in his mind. How could someone barge in? At this time, he had already asked around. Lu Junjie and the others were all guards. Without Yuan Tianxing's orders, they wouldn't have barged in. Because he knew this, he dared to drug Lu Tong while he was eating and then sleep with him. When Lu Tong woke up, it would be a success. But why would someone come here at this time? And why did they choose this time? Did someone know his plan? Lin 1-1, who was outside, walked around the living room, then pointed to the 2 glasses of water and said, "Put these 2 glasses away as evidence." Yes. Xiao Wenxing nodded and came out with a sealed bag and gloves to collect evidence. In the current situation, that Lu Tong didn't take off all his clothes. It would make sense that their deputy leader had vomited on his clothes when he was drunk. However, anyone with a discerning eye could tell what had happened. First, their leader was a level 7 arcanist, and a bottle of red wine was not enough to make him drunk. 10 bottles would be the same. Secondly, even if he vomited on his body and wanted to take off his clothes, he should at least leave his underwear on. It was obvious that he had other intentions by stripping him naked. Thirdly, the most important point was that the owner of the house was also naked, but his expression was sober. Their deputy leader had already lost consciousness. One look, and you could tell that it wasn't anything good. Moreover, the person in front of them had only known their deputy leader for a few days. When Lu Tong came out dressed, he said angrily to the other people in the room, "You broke into my house without my permission. Don't you care about the rules of the base?" Lin Wenwen turned around and sneered at Lu Tong. "Then tell me, what were you going to do just now?" Wasn't the scene that suddenly flashed in her mind when she met Lu Tong? Now she knew the cause and effect, but she didn't expect that Lu Tong could still be so calm in this situation. Lu Tong recognized Lin Wenwen the moment he saw her. He knew the identity of this woman, but he couldn't panic now. The deputy leader was drunk and kept saying that he wanted to vomit. I was afraid that he would vomit on his clothes, so I helped him take off his clothes. What's wrong with that? He gritted his teeth and tried to defend himself, but he didn't have much confidence. Why did the other party break in after he had taken off his clothes? Why not a little earlier? If she had come in before he took off his clothes, he would have found a way to get past her. Lin Wenwen looked at him mockingly. "Are you insulting our intelligence? The deputy leader is a level 7 arcanist. How could he be drunk by a bottle of red wine? If he was drunk, then he was drunk. You took off your clothes and wanted to sleep with him. Were you waiting for him to wake up and realize that he had drunk you? Then he would feel sorry for you and take responsibility?" Lu Tong's eyes widened. Disbelief, panic, and evasiveness flashed in his eyes. It was as if the secret in his heart had been exposed. Lin Wenwen and Long Qingying looked at Lu Tong as if they were looking at trash, while Lu Junjie and the others looked stunned. They had been in contact with Lu Tong for the past few days and thought that he was a good young man. They didn't expect him to be this kind of person. They had all been deceived. How did you know my plan?" Lu Tong stared at Lin Wenwen and was tongue-tied. He shook his head fiercely. "No, it's not like that. I didn't want to do that." Although he didn't admit it, his body was trembling. Lin Wenwen shrugged and said, "Let's wait for Deputy Leader Yuan to wake up, then let him investigate himself. Some people think that others don't know about their own acting." Then she said to Xing Lu and the others, "Tie him up first. We'll deal with this when the Deputy Leader wakes up." Yes. Xing Lu and the others immediately tied up Lu Tong, who was struggling and shouting, without saying another word. "What are you doing? I didn't do anything. Why do you have to tie me up? You've gone too far. When the deputy leader wakes up, he won't let you off easy." When he heard Lin Wenwen say that some people were acting, he completely panicked. No matter how many times he screamed. When Yuan Tianxing woke up, he found himself lying on an unfamiliar bed with a quilt over him. He moved and immediately noticed that something was wrong with his body. He lifted the quilt and saw that he was indeed naked. What was going on? Yuan Tianxing was still confused. He looked around blankly. He subconsciously sat up, found his clothes beside him, and put them on. As he put on his clothes, he looked out of the window. It was pitch black. His slow brain began to work. He immediately remembered that he had been drinking and eating with Lu Tong not long ago. Then Lu Tong got drunk, and he brought him into the bedroom. He looked around and had a vague impression of it. Wasn't this Lu Tong's bedroom? But he didn't see Lu Tong here either. And why wasn't he wearing any clothes? Full of doubts, Yuan Tianxing opened the door and opened it. He saw a group of people in the living room. What's going on? Why are you guys here? Yuan Tianxing said blankly. He turned around and saw Lin Wenwen and Long Qingying. Wenwen, why are you two here too? Lin Wenwen looked at Yuan Tianqing and said angrily, you'll have to ask him. As he spoke, he glanced at Lu Tong, who was tied to a chair at the side. Yuan Tianqing followed her gaze and saw Lu Tong, who was tied up and shrugging. Chapter 837. Of course, Lu Tong wouldn't say it out loud, so he didn't move when Lin Wenwen looked at him. Deputy Leader, you've been tricked. Lu Junji suddenly said to Yuan Tianqing angrily. He didn't expect Lu Tong to be so scheming. He planned to get close to their deputy leader step by step. He wanted to set a trap for the deputy leader. What's going on? Yuan Tianqing's expression turned cold when he heard that someone was tricking him. He looked at Lu Junji expressionlessly. You saw him saving people at the construction site and bumping into him at the medical center a few days ago. He was faking it. I've looked into it. The person who almost fell from the shelf at the construction site said that Lu Tong asked him to pretend and even gave him some points as payment. Lu Junjie said to Yuan Tianqing as he looked at Lu Junjie with a disgusted expression. He then continued, when you bumped into him at the medical center a few days ago, he was actually waiting for you there. Hearing Lu Junjie's words, Yuan Tianqing's expression turned gloomy even though he had a good personality. He couldn't help but stare at Lu Tong, who had his head lowered. Is he telling the truth? Lu Tong suddenly raised his head. His already pale face became even paler. He shook his head and said anxiously, No, it's not true. I didn't do anything like that. Deputy Leader, you have to believe me. As he said that, his eyes were filled with a strong, pleading emotion. He couldn't help but use his mental ability in a hurry. Then he said angrily, I really don't know what he's talking about. I didn't do anything like that, Deputy Leader. Heh, do you think no one knows what you've done? There's evidence for everything you've done, okay? I've never seen such a shameless person. Lin Wenwen suddenly sneered and looked at Lu Tong mockingly. Even at this point, this person still wanted to quibble. It was disgusting to see Lu Tong like this. Deputy Leader, look, the glass of water you drank was drugged. At this moment, Lu Junjie passed a glass in his pocket to Yuan Tianqing. He continued, You only drank half a bottle of red wine, and you're already drunk. Don't you think this is abnormal? Yuan Tianqing looked at the glass he handed over, then looked at the empty bottle of wine on the table that had not been touched. He suddenly remembered that he had helped the drunk Lu Tong into the bedroom, but he couldn't remember what happened after that. Realizing this, Yuan Tianqing's eyes turned cold. He stared at Lu Tong and asked, You drugged me? What are you doing? Lu Tong's face was so pale that it was almost translucent. His face was covered in cold sweat. Under Yuan Tianqing's cold stare, he moved his lips, but he couldn't make a sound. He never knew that the usually gentle and smiling Deputy Leader Yuan would have such a cold and frightening expression. The coldness in his eyes made those who were being stared at feel cold from head to toe. After Deputy Leader fainted, he took off all your clothes, and then he took off his own. I was going to lie on the bed with you naked. If it wasn't for Miss Wenwen's timely appearance, you might not have realized it until you woke up, Lu Junjie said. What he meant was that if Yuan Tianqing woke up and found him and Lu Tong naked on the same bed, the consequences would be unimaginable. Of course, Yuan Tianqing knew what Lu Junjie meant. If that really happened, Lu Junjie would definitely think that he had done something to Lu Tong. After all, he was a level 7 arcanist, while the other party was only a level 3 spatial arcanist. Yuan Tianqing's eyes were filled with murderous intent. So you were pretending? He didn't expect Lu Tong to be such a person. He always thought he was an honest and kind young man. He didn't expect him to use such despicable means to achieve his goals. He did not expect Lu Tong to be such a person. He had always thought that Lu Tong was an honest and kind young man. He did not expect him to be someone who would use such despicable means to achieve his goals. Lu Tong was frightened by the killing intent in his eyes. He shook his head instinctively and denied it with all his might. No. Oh, right, Brother Tianqing. The wound on his head was caused by himself. He must be brave to be so ruthless to himself. Lin Wenwen suddenly smiled at Yuan Tianqing. You're quite brave to be so ruthless to yourself. Lin Wenwen suddenly said to Yuan Tianxing with a smile. What? Yuan Tianxing couldn't react to her words. When Lu Tong heard this, he lifted his head abruptly and stared at Lin Wenwen. However, his body had already stiffened. It was actually her. She was the one who ruined his plans. We happened to pass by that day and found him sneakily hiding on the side with a stone in his hand. I didn't know what he was doing, so I stopped to take a look. When he noticed that you were not far away, he took a rock and smashed it on himself. Then, he fainted on the side of the road. Lin Wenwen looked at Lu Tong meaningfully and continued. We happened to be busy at that time, so we didn't have time to send him to the hospital. So we asked Qingqing to send him to a place with people nearby. We could send him there after others found out about his condition. Hearing these words, Lu Tong felt that not only was his body stiff, but even breathing became a little difficult. When Yuan Tianxing heard that he was on his way to gaining experience, he knocked himself out with a rock. If he walked over, he would probably find him lying on the side of the road and send him to the hospital. What was this person trying so hard to get close to him for? When he wanted to treat him to a meal, he insisted that he come to his house. It turned out that he had drugged him. If he really slept with him, even if he didn't do anything when he was unconscious, the other party could say that he had done something. In any case, when he woke up naked with the two of them tangled together, he could only take responsibility for them in an unclear situation. What else do you have to say? Yuan Tianxing's voice was cold. For the time being, he didn't think about why Lin Wenwen seemed to know everything so clearly. Lu Tong couldn't say anything at this time, because Yuan Tianxing's aura was too strong, and his mind was suppressed to the point that his mind was in chaos. People like you really don't have the right to stay in our base. Ajia, throw him out of the base. Don't let him step into the base again, Yuan Tianxing said coldly, then turned and walked out of the room. After he said this, Lu Tong's whole body suddenly went limp. He collapsed on the chair, and his eyes became dull. Are we just going to let him go like this? Lin Wenwen, who followed Yuan Tianxing out of the room, asked. Yuan Tianxing's face was still gloomy. What else can we do? Kick him out of the base. People like him who don't have any martial skills won't live for long. Oh, Lin Wenwen didn't say anything else. Chapter 838. Lin Wenwen felt that Yuan Tianxing was letting Lu Tong off too easily, but this was Yuan Tianxing's business, so she couldn't interfere. But thinking about it, if Lu Tong was thrown out of the base, it would be too difficult for him to survive in the outside world where zombies were everywhere. He was just a space-type psychic, and it would be too difficult for him to survive. Yuan Tianxing was thinking, should I just let him go? Of course not. After leaving the base, Lu Tong knew that without the protection of the base, it would be almost impossible for him to not be eaten alive by the zombies in the wilderness on the outskirts. So, throwing him out of the base was already a death sentence. If he was lucky, he might be saved by other zombie hunting teams and survive. But the zombie hunting teams around the base were all from the base, so even if they saved him, they couldn't bring him back to the base, unless they sent him to Haicheng. But the probability of that happening was almost impossible. So, the consequences weren't really letting Lu Tong off lightly. After all, what Lu Tong didn't actually hurt Yuan Tianxing or anyone else. Although Yuan Tianxing was tricked, Lu Tong's goal was only for himself, and he didn't want to hurt Yuan Tianxing. As he walked, Yuan Tianxing suddenly stopped and turned around. He looked at Lin Wenwen with a scrutinizing gaze. Speaking of which, why did you suddenly appear? Did you know what he was doing all this time? Had this last been watching him being schemed against like this all along? But this Lu Tong was quite bold, daring to scheme against him. And he had even managed to do it. Lin Wenwen was stunned when she met his gaze, then looked away guiltily. Cough. Indeed, I knew what he was doing. I just wanted to know what he was going to do in the end, so I didn't tell you. As she spoke, she carefully glanced at Yuan Tianxing from the corner of her eyes. Seeing his expressionless face, she felt slightly uneasy. Lin Wenwen didn't say anything. One reason was that Lu Tong hadn't gone too far, and the other reason was that she wanted to see if things would really go as Lin Xiao said. The results proved that what she saw was going to happen. Then, was the incident with the metal vines really going to happen? But what triggered her to awaken this ability? Could it be that a very realistic dream could stimulate her ability? There were still many doubts in Lin Wenwen's mind that he did not understand. However, it was true that she could see some fragments of what would happen in the future. When she thought of the scene of Lin Qiao giving birth, she felt slightly relieved. Yuan Tianxing looked at her silently for a few seconds before turning around and continuing to walk forward without saying anything. Lu Tong's limp body was dragged downstairs by Lu Junjia's men, then thrown into the car and driven out of the base. No, you can't throw me out. I'm a space type. I'll be of great help in the future. Please don't throw me out. After being shoved into the car, Lu Tong finally came to his senses. He immediately struggled and begged. You have guts to scheme against our deputy leader. You pretend to be weak, but you're actually such a sinister person. Xing Lu sat next to him, together with Xiao Wenxing. He pressed down on Lu Tong's shoulders so that he couldn't move. No, I just... Lu Tong panicked and wanted to deny it, but he couldn't say anything, because everything he had done had been clearly investigated. No matter how he tried to deny it, it would be useless. You're also quite capable to be able to fool us and the deputy leader. You're really amazing. Lu Junjie said coldly from the passenger's seat. It's just that kicking you out of the base is really letting you off easy. Not long after, the car drove out of the gate of the base. Then they drove for another 2 kilometers before reaching the zombie defense line. Sensing the smell of Lin Xiao's blood coming from the car, the zombies uniformly opened up a path from afar. After they went out, a figure flashed out and curiously followed behind the car, until the car stopped after driving for more than 10 kilometers. Then, a person with both hands tied was pushed out of the car and the door closed. Lu Junjie and the others were about to drive away, but suddenly, a figure fell from the sky and landed in front of their car. Lu Junjie and the driver were both dazed for a moment. Then they recognized that it was one of the zombie leaders under their leader. Oh no, it was now a level 1 king. After knowing that it was one of their own, they were not so nervous. They just got out of the car in confusion. Why did this level 1 king suddenly appear? Uncle Zombie number 3 crossed his arms in front of his chest, raised one hand to touch his chin, and curiously looked at Lu Tong, who was pushed to the ground and struggling to stand up. After seeing Lu Junjie get out of the car, he immediately looked up at him. Although there was a questioning look in his eyes, it was blocked by the sunglasses. Lu Junjie seemed to have guessed what he was thinking and immediately said, he was kicked out of the base, and he is not allowed to enter again. The uncle also opened his mouth and asked with a low and hoarse voice, what did he do? His voice didn't sound like a human's voice. Although it was low, it was very unpleasant to hear. It also sounded like it was stuck in his throat and didn't come out. He schemed against Deputy Leader Yuan, and the deputy leader ordered him to be thrown out. Lu Junjie endured the unpleasant voice and said expressionlessly, thrown out? Does that mean I don't want it? If he didn't want it, could he eat it? Uncle number 3 touched his chin in thought, then nodded to Lu Junjie and the others, and then waved to them, telling them to go back first. Lu Junjie immediately got into the car, and the car made a turn and drove back to the base. Help me. I will do anything. At this time, Lu Tong finally stood up, and seeing the desolate city streets around him, a sense of fear immediately filled his heart. It was as if zombies would suddenly rush towards him at any time, and his hands were tied, so it would be difficult for him to save himself. He didn't know that the man wearing sunglasses in front of him was actually not a human. Although his voice was very unpleasant to hear, as if his throat was broken, he could still speak, right? If he could speak, then he was a human. So he subconsciously asked the man to help him. But very quickly, he saw the man's pale lips curl into a cold smile. Then he opened his mouth, but it wasn't to talk to him. Roar dash! The zombie's roar came from his mouth. Lu Tong was a little confused, and he stared at him with his eyes wide open. Before he could react, a few figures suddenly rushed out from around him. When he saw these people with dark and cold eyes, their backs were hunched, and their nails were sharp and long, Lu Tong's heart was filled with despair. He only saw a blur in front of him, and he felt like he was fiercely thrown to the ground. Roar dash. Chapter 839. Looking at the corpse that was dismembered and eaten until only the remains were left, the zombie uncle turned around and left the place with a leap. Soon, he appeared on the roof of a hotel on the other side. This hotel was outside the base's wall, not inside the base. But the size of the hotel was bigger than the previous one, and the location was where Lin Xiao was going to build the zombie base. After Lin Xiao's meeting that day, she asked Lu Jun to help show Lily, Elmar, and the others move the zombies' nest to this place, because that place was going to be demolished. Lin Xiao also moved over, of course. She lived in the highest and largest suite in the hotel. When Lin Hao came here to eat, Lin Xiao had just moved in. The zombie uncle walked down the stairs from the roof and found the door to Lin Xiao's room. There were two zombie kings standing quietly at the door. When they saw the zombie uncle come down, they did not react. The uncle stood at the door and knocked on the door, then the door was opened from the inside. Duan looked at him and nodded to let him in. Is it done? Lin Xiao, who was sitting on the sofa looking at the blueprints, saw the uncle come in and asked casually. Yes. The zombie uncle nodded and answered with a hoarse voice. Then he took out Lu Tong's energy core from his pocket and stretched it out. Duan, who was next to him, automatically took it. It's done. You can leave. Lin Xiao nodded and said expressionlessly. The zombie uncle came in for less than 2 minutes, then turned around and left. It's only a level 3 energy core. What's so special about it? Seeing that Lin Xiao specifically asked the zombie uncle to kill the space ability user and take back the energy core, Duan asked in confusion. It's a little useful to me. Lin Xiao took the energy core and squeezed it in her palm. The crystal core that was originally emitting a transparent light directly turned into a small puddle of powder in her palm. Feeling that there was another small space in her space, Lin Xiao's heart slightly moved. It seemed that this level 3 space was much bigger than she thought. For example, a level 1 space ability user space was at most 1 or 2 cubic meters. A level 2 space ability user space was about the size of an ordinary wardrobe, and a level 3 space was about the size of a washroom. However, after Lin Xiao absorbed the energy of this space, the small space formed was the size of a single room that was tens of square meters. This was actually due to the fusion of Lin Xiao's own spatial energy, but Lin Xiao was still unaware of this factor. Of course, she wouldn't leave someone as calculative as Lu Tong alive. Although it was difficult to throw him out of the base and let him live alone, he still had a great chance to survive. Moreover, if he had the chance to survive to Haicheng, he would probably plot against Lin Wenwen in the future, because Lin Wenwen had ruined his plans. Therefore, Xiao Lin decided to send a zombie to kill Lu Tong. Nothing is safer than the dead. The next day, Lin Xiao met with the people of the Green Mountain Base in the living room. Lin Xiao said in disdain as he looked at the strange people with their heads and faces covered. Show your heads. Everyone here knows who they are. It's as eye-catching as wearing an Ultraman costume. Okay? Lei Cheng, Yi Yingyue, and the 3 weirdos. Wait. How is this like Ultraman? Speak. Didn't you say you want to make a deal with us? What are you going to use to exchange for something from our base? Lin Xiao sat on the sofa with her back against the sofa. She crossed her long legs and crossed her hands in front of her. In fact, Lin Xiao vaguely knew that they wanted to exchange for something related to zombies, but she was curious about what they were going to use to exchange. Although munitions and food were very precious, she obviously didn't lack them. When Yi Yingyue heard this, she immediately turned around and took out a finger-long potion from her bag. Through the glass, it could be seen that it contained 50% light yellow liquid. This is a new potion we developed. It has a 15-day isolation effect on the human body. In other words, if this potion is injected into the body, it will change the human body's attractiveness to zombies in a short period of time. It will change their favorite to the most hated. How about it? Are you interested? Yi Yingyue excitedly introduced the potion to Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao was stunned for a moment. Then her eyes flashed as she looked at the potion in the baby-faced girl's hand. Looking at the girl's proud expression, it was obviously not fake. Moreover, Lin Xiao could sense whether the girl was telling the truth or not. It turned out to be an isolation potion. Although it only lasted for 15 days, this was already a very powerful effect. Think about it. If all humans used this potion in the future, zombies would run away after smelling it. It would be much easier to hunt zombies, especially those ordinary zombies. Can I see it? Lin Xiao's words were obviously interested. Yi Yingyue generously handed the potion to Shun Yuzhen, who walked beside her. Lin Xiao took it and opened the lid to smell it. Immediately, a very pungent and disgusting smell rushed into her nose. Lin Xiao immediately frowned and closed the lid again. It was really disgusting. It was like a human smelling the stench of a rotting animal. It was disgusting and pungent. Such a good thing. What are your conditions? Lin Xiao touched her nose with one hand and took the potion far away with the other. Shin Yuzhen quickly took it from her hand and quickly put it on the table behind her. Her expression was like she was holding a bomb. Just now, when Lin Xiao opened the lid, Shun Yuzhen, who was standing next to her, also smelled it. It was simply disgusting to death. You also know that they also exist in our base. We don't ask for much. We just want to know what method you use to restore their appearance. At least in the future, when we go out to meet people, we don't need to cover their heads and faces like this. Yi Yingyue was full of smiles. Her big eyes were full of curiosity. She pointed to the zombies next to her who had already taken off their masks and said, in fact, she also wanted to know why the zombies in this base could not only restore their appearance, but also speak and have high intelligence. Unlike their side, the zombies' intelligence was not high. Other than the special director of their Qingshan base, the other zombies only had the IQ of an 8 or 9-year-old child. But Yingyue also knew that this was too much. Every one of them was the base's secret. They only needed to know one for now, and the others could be slowly learned later. Lin Xiao's eyes flashed, and the corners of her mouth curled up into a mysterious smile. So you want to use these potions to help your base's zombies exchange for benefits? I didn't expect you to treat them like this. I think you should capture them for research. Chapter 840. Yi Yingyue didn't care about what she said. She smiled and shook her head. No, Miss Lu might not know that one of the directors of our base is a zombie. If it wasn't for her, our base wouldn't have been established. Although there are a lot of zombies in our base, they used to be patients. They used to be mentally unstable people, but after becoming zombies, they became much more clear-headed than when they were still humans. Just like your base, there aren't many humans in our base. At this moment, Lei Cheng, who had been sitting in the background, spoke. But Lin Xiao understood what he meant. There weren't many humans in Qingshan base, but there were a lot of zombies. They probably wouldn't be able to last until the end by themselves. Furthermore, their geographical location was too far away and the conditions were bad. Even if they wanted to escape and rely on other bases, it would be too difficult. Therefore, they could only cooperate with zombies to exchange for survival conditions. Lin Xiao had a faint smile on her face. Although your medicine is good, our base doesn't actually need your medicine because we have our own way to hide from the zombies' attention. Now, Lin Xiao could use a small amount of her blood to create a large amount of disguised medicine. As long as humans carried it on their bodies, their scent would be covered by Lin Xiao's scent. Therefore, let alone normal zombies, as long as they weren't zombies higher than level 6, they wouldn't come close. If Qingshan base used this medicine to trade with other bases, it would definitely be of great use. But it wouldn't be of much use here. Yi Yingyue and Lei Cheng were both stunned. Their eyes flashed with hesitation and blankness. This was because they really didn't think that this base would actually research a medicine with the same effect as theirs. They came here full of confidence, but now it seemed like they were slapped in the face. This caused the two of them to be unable to react for a moment. If the other party wasn't interested in their medicine, then this kind of trade wouldn't be possible. Lin Xiao saw the two's expression and smiled. Although I'm not interested in your medicine, I can first help you restore a small portion of the zombie's appearance. But this way, your base would owe me a big favor. If I need help in the future, that would be enough. Yi Yingwei and Lei Cheng's eyes immediately lit up when they heard this. Although they felt like they were being controlled by others, they still couldn't refuse such conditions. The two of them looked at each other, and then Lei Cheng said, "We need to discuss this matter with the higher-ups in our base. I wonder if Miss Liu will keep her word?" The smile on Lin Xiao's face didn't change. He said, "I'm the leader of a base after all. I can't go back on my word. It doesn't matter. You can go back and discuss it however you want. If you agree, then you can directly bring those who need to restore their appearances here, because this can only be done in our base, and it won't be too short." Yi Yingwen nodded happily. "No problem." Soon, the people from Qingshan base left, and Lin Xiao's side became quiet again, as if looking at the two men staring at each other in his office. Lin Xiao speechlessly turned his head to look at the work documents on the table and said, "You too. Did you come to my office to practice cross-eye training? If you have something to say, say it. If not, please go ahead. The door is over there. I won't see you out." Lin Hao stared closely at Wu Qingyue's emotionless eyes and said confidently, "I came here to observe the leader's physical condition. This is my duty as a doctor of the base. But may I ask, why does the leader of High City stay in someone else's office all the time and affect their work?" The obvious hostility in his words was directed directly at Wu Qingyue. At this moment, Wu Qingyue didn't have the usual smile on his face. Instead, he said expressionlessly, "Of course I have business to discuss with the leader of your base. This has nothing to do with the doctor. Dr. Lin, you've seen and observed. It seems that there's nothing wrong with Miss Liu's body. Dr. Lin, you can leave. I won't see you out." Lin Hao choked for a moment, but he didn't give up just like that. He then sneered and said, "That won't do. Our leader's body needs to be observed at all times recently. Of course, I have to be by her side to be safe." Wu Qingyue said indifferently, "I see that Dr. Lin is quite busy in the hospital. Are you going to leave your medical department here? That's not very good." "Thank you. My work doesn't need to be controlled by the leader of the base outside. It's also my job to follow the leader and observe her body." Lin Hao leaned back on the sofa, crossed his arms in front of his chest, and crossed his legs. He stared at Wu Qingyue's eyes with a smug smile and raised his chin slightly. He looked like he was provoking him. Wu Qingyue raised his eyebrows and was about to speak when he was interrupted. "All right, you two. You're affecting my work. Get out." Lin Xiao's cold voice cut in between the two. He couldn't bear to look at these two's childish behavior. "If he goes out, I'll go out." Lin Hao glared at Wu Qingyue and said unwillingly after being chased out by his sister. Wu Qingyue's handsome face that was originally expressionless suddenly smiled and said, "I have business to attend to. Leader Liu, the weather is getting warmer. All the major corps hunting teams have started to move out of the base. We have to plan the distribution of areas." When Lin Hao saw Wu Qingyue's smile, he felt that it was an eyesore. However, this was indeed an official matter, so he really couldn't interrupt. "Oomph." Lin Hao's expression darkened as he snorted and stood up. He lifted his leg and walked out. If it wasn't for this bastard always sticking to his sister, he wouldn't have found an excuse to come here and go against him. Seeing Lin Hao leave in a huff, the smile in Wu Qingyue's eyes deepened. It was obvious that he was a little proud. Lin Xiao rolled her eyes at him and said expressionlessly, "Do we need you to deal with this kind of thing? Go find Lin Feng about the distribution of areas. I don't care about this right now." Wu Qingyue looked at her and said with an indifferent smile, "You're the leader, right? Why would you let your subordinate handle this kind of thing? Aren't you afraid that it can't be done well? Although he's a subordinate, he's still my brother. I know my brother's ability better than you." Lin Xiao silently retorted in her heart, but her face was still indifferent as she said, "I believe in his ability. This isn't a big deal. Are you that unwilling to see me?" A trace of hurt flashed in Wu Qingyue's eyes, but he quickly concealed it. His smile became a little bitter, but even if it was bitter, it was quickly thrown away. Then, the light in his eyes darkened again. His smile became a little cold as he said, "Or are you more willing to be with that Dr. Lin?" Chapter 841. The jealousy in Wu Qingyue's words was directed at Lin Xiao, and he could feel it himself. Although this was very inappropriate, he had reached the end of his patience these past few days. Fisk, aren't you annoying? If you're here just to say this, please leave. I have no time, nor do I have the mood to care about you. Lin Xiao said impatiently. Actually, she wanted to use Lin how to make Wu Qingyue give up. Wu Qingyue's expression did show some reaction, but it did not have much effect. She sighed in her heart, not knowing what was wrong with Wu Qingyue. Wu Qingyue looked at her deeply, then suddenly stood up and walked out of the office. After Lin Xiao saw him leave, she immediately asked Shen Yuzhen to invite Xiao Lily and Elmarch. Go and look for this place, see if there's a metal-type vine. Level 7. If there is, don't let go of this energy core. Lin Xiao pointed at the address that Lin 11 had told him on the map. He had even written down the details of the address. She had wanted to go take a look herself, but considering that the one in her stomach was not very stable, she gave up on the idea. She asked Xiao Lily and Elmar to bring the other zombies over. The power of a level 7 mutant plant was not something that a level 7 zombie king could handle. Since one couldn't handle it, then two would do. Therefore, she sent Xiao Lily and Elmar to deal with them. Xiao Lily and Elmar looked at Lin Xiao strangely. Previously, when they went out to collect energy cores, they would split into two teams, and they would search by themselves. It was the first time that Lin Xiao directly asked the two of them to go together. However, the two of them did not say anything, just nodded and took the information before leaving. They brought the 5 level 1 kings out of the base and headed towards the location that Lin Xiao had mentioned. Very quickly, Lin Xiao received news that Wu Qingyue had left the base. Left? Is it true this time? Lin Xiao asked Xiedong, who had come to report the news. Xiedong nodded and replied in a hoarse voice, "It's true." Lin Xiao hid her surprised expression and nodded. "It's fine if they left. I wonder who it was that wanted to talk to me about the division of territories. From the looks of it, Sea City will probably send someone else to discuss this matter in 2 days, Xiedong said. And got it. Let's go out first. Lin Xiao nodded indifferently, but in his mind, he was thinking, could it be that the acting with Lin Hao this time was effective? While Lin Xiao was still thinking about how strange Wu Qingyue's sudden departure was, Xiedong turned around and walked to the door. Just as he was about to open the door suddenly opened, and it was fast and fierce. Bang! Xiedong held his forehead expressionlessly and pushed against the door with one hand. Xiedong? I'm sorry. Are you okay? Lu Jun didn't expect to bump into Xiedong the moment he opened the door. He couldn't help but ask with concern. I'm fine. Xiedong shook his head expressionlessly and put his hand down. He pulled the door open to let her in. He was a zombie, not a human. What's the big deal about bumping into the door? Sorry, I didn't notice you were behind the door. After all, Lu Jun bumped into him. Although they were both zombies now, he still had manners. He continued to apologize to Xiedong apologetically. It's okay. You can go. Xiedong shook his head again. This was a small matter between colleagues. Besides, he was a man, and the other party was a woman. Of course, he wouldn't mind. After saying that he was fine, he waved at her to let her in and walked out. What's wrong? What's the matter? Lin Xiao saw the collision between the two of them and asked Lu Jun when she walked over. I've discussed with Heaven's Wings Minister. We want to build a few houses at the plantation. We want a staff to live there and guard the place. We don't want more people to come and cause trouble. This is the document. You can approve it. Lu Jun walked to the chair in front of her desk and sat down. He handed her the application document. Every plantation would build some houses for the staff to live in as dormitories. This was normal. Moreover, Wushan was more than 10 kilometers away from the base. Lin Xiao had already thought about building a few dormitories, but she had been so busy that she forgot about it. Yes, you're right. It's time to build a few dormitories. You'll need more people when you're busy. Lin Xiao nodded. He took the document and glanced at it. Then he wrote something and stamped it. Then he pushed it back to her. As long as Lu Jun took the document she stamped and gave it to Yuan Tianxing, he would naturally make the arrangements. However, Lu Jun took the document from Lin Xiao and didn't immediately stand up to leave. She held the document in her hand and looked at Lin Xiao. She wanted to say something, but didn't. What? Lin Xiao looked at her strangely. Although Lu Jun was now her subordinate, after so long, she was actually half a good friend of Lin Xiao. After all, she was one of the people who knew Lin Xiao's identity. Does Wu Chengyue believe your superficial relationship with Lin Hao? Lu Jun asked her curiously. Today, as soon as Wu Chengyue left, most people in the base knew about it. Anyway, they had a few subordinates under them, so they got the news very quickly. Wu Chengyue had been going against Lin Hao for the past few days. They were well aware of what was going on. Those who didn't know would think that the handsome, young Dr. Lin in their base had fallen in love with their beautiful leader. Was that why he was jealous of High City's leader, who was also pursuing their leader? Those who knew the truth all guessed that Lin Xiao was using Wu Chengyue's identity as her brother to pretend to be intimate with him to drive Wu Chengyue away. In fact, that was indeed the case. In the past few days, they saw that Wu Chengyue, who liked to smile, didn't smile as much. They often saw his expressionless face. Although his face wasn't gloomy, his expressionless face also made him feel very pressured. Lin Xiao glanced at her and suddenly realized that her main purpose for coming here today was to gossip, not work. I also hope that's the case. I want him to know when to back off, she said lightly. Hey, I say, Great Leader Wu is actually pretty good, right? He's handsome, gentle, has a good figure, and is capable. His daughter is also very cute and likes you so much. I think he's quite sincere now. Don't you think it's a pity? Lu Jun looked at her and said. Actually, after such a long period of observation, Lu Jun felt that Wu Chengyue was actually quite good. After all, he was already a leader at such a young age. Moreover, he was powerful and invincible. His character and personality were both good. He heard that his daughter wasn't his biological daughter either. She hadn't even married before. The point was, she was really a good match for Lin Xiao. Oh no, according to their real age, Lin Xiao was a little too young, because she was 3 years older than Wu Chengyue. Chapter 842. Lin Xiao also faintly felt that Wu Chengyue's gaze towards her before he left seemed to have changed, but she still didn't believe that he would really fall in love with her. She wasn't young anymore, and she was a rational person. Often when it came to feelings, if it wasn't for family and long-term friendship, she would rarely believe in others. Especially this kind of person who wanted to forcefully invade her life. So she subconsciously thought about the other's intentions. And then there was a rejection from the bottom of her heart. In her life, Yang Jianhua's betrayal wasn't the only one. She also experienced betrayal before the end of the world. So although she hated Yang Jianhua's betrayal, fortunately, with the gap of amnesia, she slowly accepted this fact. Otherwise, it would have taken a lot of her energy just to struggle out of the shock. So when she felt that Wu Chengyue's purpose wasn't pure, she directly rejected him. Even now, even if the other party was sincere, she didn't want to think about whether it was true or not. Hearing Lu Jun's words, she indifferently shook her head. I won't. It always bothers me that he is like this. If he can stop bothering me in the future, that would be even better. Although she was pestered for a few months, Lin Xiao still didn't have any other feelings for him. It was just that the look in his eyes not long ago made her feel slightly relieved. Maybe he realized that the other party had the intention to give up. TSK, your life has been frozen now. Do you still plan to live alone in the future? Lu Jun looked at her and said, How lonely would it be to be alone? Would you feel lonely and empty? Her heart might be corroded by loneliness, forming a black hole. Fortunately, she still had a son. Think about it. If she didn't have her son to accompany her, how boring would it be to live like a zombie? Are you talking about me? Who said I'm alone? I still have a family. But you, when are you going to find a father for Tong Tong? It's also very hard for you to take care of him alone. Lin Xiao directly rolled her eyes and threw the topic back to her. From the current physical state of a psychic, If it was a natural death, their lifespan would certainly be longer than a normal person's. But if it was a high-level zombie, their lifespan might be longer. Me? I'm fine now. I have a job and food to eat, as long as my Tong Tong doesn't starve. There's no need to find a father for him. Lu Jun subconsciously rejected this matter, not to mention the fact that she could raise the child alone. Even if she really wanted to find one, she didn't dare to look for one now. She had to get the child's permission first. However, Tong Tong was still too young. All right, if there's nothing else, hurry up and get out. I'm busy and you're here to gossip with me. Lin Xiao angrily chased her out. In the past few days, because the two men had been quarreling in the office every day as a battlefield, she couldn't deal with business quietly. So some things piled up. Now that he was gone, he could calm down and deal with these things. All right, I'm just saying that if you have even the slightest bit of confidence in Great Leader Wu, then you should hurry up and take advantage of him. Otherwise, who knew how many women in Sea City would covet him? Just don't regret it when he's snatched away one day. Lu Jun stood up and said this before opening the door and walking out. What the hell? Whoever wants it can have it. I won't regret it. Lin Xiao looked at the closed door speechlessly. In the following days, Wu Chunyue really didn't appear again. Qiu Lily and the others returned 3 days later and gave Lin Xiao a green energy core the size of a baby's fist. The energy core of a level 7 mutant plant contained a large amount of non-attribute energy. You don't know, but the number of vines on this vine is uncountable. They cover the entire park, covering the sky and the earth. It's strong and thick, and it's like a piece of steel that can't be cut. When Qiu Lily and the others returned, they were a little disheveled. She first went back to take a shower and changed into a clean set of clothes before running to report to Lin Xiao. Qiu Lily was a little angry, perhaps because the vine had dirted her body. So how did you guys kill it? Lin Xiao asked curiously as he looked at the energy core in his hand. It was just as Wenwen had described. It seemed that Wenwen's second ability was really foresight. However, it seemed that this ability of hers needed to be triggered. It's her. She hid her presence and ran into the main trunk of the vine, then pulled out the energy core. Qiu Lily pointed at Elmarch. Elmar nodded and said, although this vine's vines are very powerful, as long as you get close to its main trunk, its attack power will disappear. Also, this mutant plant doesn't have any defensive abilities against its main trunk. The energy core grew on it like a fruit, and I cut it off with my claws. Elmar was a little surprised as she said this. Hey, but how did you know there was such a thing there? Did you go there? Qiu Lily asked. No, someone told me. Also, I called you guys over to verify something else. Lin Xiao shook his head and said, he wanted to verify if what Wenwen said was true. Oh, the weather in the middle of April had begun to warm up, but the temperature was still a little higher during the day. At night, it was still cold. Lin Xiao didn't make any big moves recently. He just started to build another base on the other side of the base. Lei Cheng and Yi Yingwei also went back to Qingshan base with Lin Xiao's words. After discussing with Lan Lu and the other two directors, they agreed to Lin Xiao's conditions. They were ready to take a group of zombies to the base again. After the zombie emperor stopped controlling the tide of zombies in Huaxia City, the action of clearing the zombies was also very smooth. Because there was no more tide of zombies, they also cleared more than half of the ordinary zombies in the past half-month. All the zombies' bodies were either burned or buried deep in the ground. The reconstruction of the Black Dragon base was also gradually stabilized. Although it was not so fast to restore the original strength, it was already very good to clear the zombies and resurrect the plant base. They believed that there were so many people, and they could almost recover in a year and a half. Haicheng was still the same. There was no change. But on the other side of Skyfire Base, the pressure was much lower, because one of their leaders was missing, just like the situation of the Hidden Cloud City before. Among the 3 leaders of Skyfire Base, Himu had disappeared in the Earth Dragon Base, and now it was the turn of another leader, Gu Yikong. Li Jingye felt that the sense of crisis in his heart was getting stronger and stronger. Seeing the end of the Earth Dragon Base and the Hidden Cloud City, He had a hunch that the next one would be their Skyfire base. Chapter 843. Wu Chengyue, who had returned to High City, was actually a little disheartened. After all, it was one thing for her to be stubborn, but at the very least, she had never been close to any man. However, this time, her relationship with Dr. Lin was closer than he had imagined. She even let him know about the existence of the child. This degree of trust made Wu Chengyue feel that his heart could not calm down. He knew that these two people had never interacted before. They were not friends, nor were they relatives. But she was willing to trust him so much that she even told him such a big secret as the zombie constitution and pregnancy. Wu Qingyue knew that if the female zombie did not trust him 200%, how could she let him know about it? If it was him, the female zombie did not intend to tell him about it. Thinking of this, Wu Qingyue felt a little uncomfortable in his heart. When he saw these two people appear together, the strange atmosphere made him feel as if he could not enter their world. So every time he saw the two of them talking these days, the unknown sense of familiarity in their tone made him feel very sad. So he decided to leave first. He did not want to see them like this. He had to take it slow. Wu Yueling, who had returned to High City, looked unhappy again. She still wanted to stay in a place where there were zombies. But Papa and the zombie mama looked strange. Wu Yueling was young and ignorant, but children were also sensitive. Moreover, she was a child with autism, so she could sense the changes around her more than ordinary children. For example, the tone and expression of Wu Qingyue and Lin Xiao, as well as the atmosphere. Although she felt it, she did not dare to do anything. Wu Qingyue sat on the sofa and looked at Wu Yueling's eyes. He also knew that she was unhappy. He sighed and held his daughter in his arms. Lingling, what if the zombie mama that Daddy is going to find for you doesn't like Daddy, but like someone else? She will go with someone else in the future and won't be with us anymore, Wu Qingyue said to her with some frustration. Hearing this, Wu Yueling's eyes suddenly opened wide. She quickly reached out and grabbed Wu Qingyue's clothes, shaking her head anxiously. I'm sad too, but Daddy can't do anything now. She doesn't like me in the first place. What if I do something to make her hate me? Wu Chengyue said to her. It was because he was suppressing the anger in his heart. He was afraid that if he continued to stay there, he might get angry. If he did something to that female zombie, it would be a big loss. I say, you only stayed there for a few days. I thought you would not come back for at least half a month. A loud voice came from the door, and the tall figure of Xiao Yunlong came in. Wu Qingyue didn't even look at him as he replied, I'm afraid if I stay here any longer, I'll beat someone up. Ah, I heard. Ha ha. There's a young and handsome Dr. Lin around Miss Lu recently. After Xiao Yunlong came in, he simply touched on the sore spot and said with a smile that deserved a spanking. Wu Qingyue glanced at him expressionlessly and smiled gently. I've also heard that Xiaoya has been quite close to Kong Qingming recently. What? Aren't you afraid that it'll be snatched away? However, this time Xiao Yunlong did not buy it and said indifferently, You can rest assured that Qingming already has someone in his heart. I won't covet my little you. Wu Qingyue, who did not receive a blow. Why did he feel so uncomfortable looking at his confident expression? What should he do if he wanted to hit someone? So, you came back in defeat just like that? Are you going to give up? Xiao Yunlong sat on the sofa and looked at him curiously. Impossible. She is pregnant with my child. How can I give up? Wu Chengyue replied without thinking. Then why did you come back? Xiao Yunlong's expression was even more curious. I'm afraid that if I push her too hard, she will be disgusted, so I can only keep a little distance. By the way, you arranged the time to set up the division of the area with them. The weather is getting warmer. It's almost time to go out to hunt zombies. Wu Qingyue said, but his expression suddenly sank again. I don't know why, but I always feel that in this winter, the evolution of the mutants seems to have accelerated a lot. The probability of the appearance of level 7 mutant plants and animals is getting higher and higher. This phenomenon was not very good. The evolution of human ability users had been much faster. But if the mutants that were more difficult to deal with than zombies accelerated their evolution, Then for human survivors, it would become another factor that was more troublesome than zombies. In the future, the success rate of the corpse hunting team going out of the base to hunt would be reduced again. Speaking of this matter, Xiao Yunlong's face also became serious. If you don't say it, I still want to tell you. I just received the news. Half a month ago, the Level 3 corpse hunting group in the outer area sent out a large team, but only 3 people came back. The others are all dead. A large team? All dead? Wu Qingyue's eyes narrowed, although his expression did not sink. But there was a faint feeling of oppression. A large team was about 30 to 50 people, because a large team was usually composed of 3 squads, and a squad was about 10 to 12 people. Xiao Yunlong nodded. Yes, the leader of the team was a level 6 fire ability user, and there were 4 level 5 ability users. Most of the others were level 2 to 3, and there were a dozen ordinary team members. But today, only 2 level 5 ability users and an ordinary person came back. The others did not come back. His face became somewhat depressed as he continued. The information these 3 people brought back was that they mistakenly entered a nest of mutant rats. Those mutant rats were very big, twice the size of an ordinary house cat. The number was terrifying, and there were many level 5 and 6 giant rats. These rats were very large in number, could drill into the ground, and had very sharp teeth that could bite tungsten steel. The 3 of them are lucky to be able to come back alive. When Wu Qingyue heard this information, he frowned. What made him uneasy was not how fast these mutant rats attacked, or how sharp their teeth were, but the number. Xiao Yunlong just said the number was terrifying. Rats had always been a creature whose fecundity and survival ability were proportional, so Wu Ziyue was now worried about the number of rats. What is the specific situation? Do they see the number of rats in this nest? How big? Wu Qingyue continued to frown and asked. This is what I came here to say. They said that when they only came into contact with the tip of the iceberg of the rat nest, they were frightened by a large number of huge rats gushing out of the ground, and when they reacted, it was already too late. These rats were not only big, but also strong and extremely fast. Think about it. A large number of densely packed rats rushing up, even if you use your ability to attack, it would be useless. You can only defend, because there are really too many of them. Xiao Yunlong thought of the 3 people's faces that still had a look of fear and said the information. Chapter 844. As soon as Xiao Yunlong finished speaking, suddenly a person hurriedly came in from outside the door. Leader, there's a situation. Xiao Liqing's face was also very dignified as he came in with a document. When he saw Xiao Yunlong, he was stunned for a moment before he continued to walk over. Leader Xiao is here to talk about the mutated rats. I heard that the number of these mutated rats is very large, and it is currently impossible to estimate. Moreover, these rats eat zombies. They eat almost everything. Whether it's metal or buildings, they didn't let go of anything. After Xiao Liqing came in, he directly handed the information in his hand to Wu Qingyue to see. Where is it? Have you sent people to observe the situation? When Wu Qingyue heard that these rats also ate zombies, he immediately thought of the base. If these rats went over, wouldn't those zombies eventually become the food of these rats? He knew that rats were omnivorous and also had the habit of grinding their teeth. After mutating, their teeth were even more terrible. These rats were not like ordinary zombies, moving slowly. These rats were very swift and agile. It's in the Fuyang Safari Park, and it seems like they've been released this time. They've been surging up from their underground nest. Now, everything on the ground has been eaten clean, Xiao Liqing said. At this time, in the Fuyang District Safari Park, a large number of mutated beasts were desperately escaping from the zoo area. All the mutated beasts, big and small, high level and low level, fled in all directions without a care in the world. Sand and stones were flying on the ground. Dust filled the sky, and grass and trees were flying in disorder. In the sky, there were many mutated birds flying in from time to time, and then not long after, they flew out again, their claws holding one or two huge black rats that were struggling and twisting. And at this time, at the place where Lin Xiao once saved the little tiger, there was a huge round hole, like a black mouth. This mouth was constantly spitting out huge black long-haired rats. The smallest size was bigger than a cat, and the biggest was about the same size as a pig. The fur on these rats was long, black, and very thick. Pairs of vicious eyes stared, and a pair of huge, sharp teeth gnawed at whatever they saw. Even rocks were not spared. As long as it blocked their path, it would be bitten. Several kilometers around the entrance of the cave had been turned into a wasteland. All the trees and vines had disappeared, leaving only a piece of land that had been gnawed clean. Squeak, 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 squeak. Two giant rats the size of ordinary pigs stood upright at the entrance of the cave. They retracted their front claws and kept squeaking. It was as if he was commanding these rats that kept coming out. As far as the eye could see, there was only a layer of surging rat tide that was constantly running outwards. Apart from this cave entrance, there was another similar cave entrance to the southwest. The situation was the same. In total, there were 5 or 6 such holes that were constantly pouring out of them. Kacha! Kacha! This was the sound of the rats biting a tree trunk that required 2 or 3 people to wrap their arms around. Not long after, the tall tree fell down. Countless rats swarmed around it, constantly gnawing on the tree's leaves. Hua hua hua, kacha kacha, squeak squeak, such sounds could be heard everywhere. Of course, there were also a few angry roars from time to time. Roar! At this time, there was a huge lion. It didn't run out of the range of the rats that were quickly catching up. The rats directly rushed onto its body, and then used their claws and teeth together. Immediately, the lion's body was badly mutilated. Roar! The huge lion was in pain, but the rats didn't fall off its body. Instead, they tightly hung on its body, and there were still rats coming from behind. Soon, the huge lion was pounced on by hundreds and thousands of black-haired rats. In less than 2 minutes, the rats that covered the lion's body left, leaving behind a large pool of blood. Not even the bones were left. So not long after, this zoo that was almost turned into a primeval forest was quickly eaten by these rats into a wasteland. There were still rats rushing out of the rat holes, and the vanguard troops had already razed everything to the ground. Other than plants and animals, they also pounced on the slow-moving zombies. Even if the zombies' bodies were already rotten, it still didn't affect the rats' appetite. Roar! In front of the group of rats, a few kilometers away, there was a wind zombie on the top of a tree that kept flying out and quickly rushed towards the direction of the base. After a few hours, he finally rushed to the periphery of the base. From the top of the building, he quickly flashed past the zombie defense line and rushed towards the other side of the base where the zombies were at the restaurant. This zombie's entrance wasn't stopped, which meant that he was originally a zombie in this base. After he arrived at the hotel, he quickly found Xiedong's office. Roar, roar, roar. Boss, 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 bossies. This level 4 wind zombie was one of the 5 subordinates that Lin Xiao assigned to Xiedong. What? Quiet. Xiedong saw his impatient expression and lightly shouted without any expression. Roar, roar, roar. There's a rat. There's a rat. There's a rat. The wind zombie anxiously stood in front of Xiedong's office desk. Those rats gave him a strong sense of danger. Even if he ran back to the base, he still had a lingering fear. What rat? Speak properly. Xiedong looked at him and slightly frowned. The zombies under him were all modified by the leader's virus, so their intelligence had increased a lot. Their ability to express also improved, and they could communicate well. But now this wind zombie was a bit incoherent, and he didn't know what was going on. Roar, roar. Roar, roar, roar. Rats. Many, many, many. The wind zombie roared at Xiedong, and his expression seemed to calm down. While speaking, he used his 2 hands to gesture the size of the rats in front of his chest. Roar, roar, so big, so big. He gestured the size of the rats, and so on. Xiedong listened to his words and slightly pondered. He understood what he meant. He saw a lot of mutated rats, and looking at his nervous expression, There should be a lot of them, and their fighting power was especially strong. But if it was just mutated rats, why would he be so nervous? Xiedong couldn't imagine the situation the wind zombie was talking about, but he vaguely guessed that there was some uneasy factor that made him so nervous. He stood up and decided to go see the situation first. "Let's go. Take me to see it again," Xiedong said to the wind zombie. But this time, his obedient subordinate shook his head repeatedly. "Roar, not going, not going, not going, going to be eaten." Chapter 845. If you don't come with me, how am I supposed to know where that place is? Xiedong looked at his subordinate with a blank expression and thought to himself speechlessly. "No, you have to lead the way." Xiedong looked at his subordinate and said firmly. Roar dash. The wind zombie immediately stopped because Xiedong's words contained a command that could not be refused. "It's okay, we can just watch from afar," Xiedong said softly. His hoarse voice sounded a little more magnetic because it was soft, and it wasn't that unpleasant to hear. The wind zombie could only follow him out. When they reached the roof, Xiedong brought the wind zombie and quietly left the base. The other zombies under him were actually sent by Xiedong to other places to collect information and hadn't returned yet. Xiedong brought the wind zombie and quickly drove towards the direction of Fuyang District. After an hour, they reached a location that was a few kilometers away from the wildlife park. When they arrived here, Xiedong had a bad feeling. He immediately got off the car and found a high-altitude place to use the binoculars to look at the direction of the zoo. However, before he could use the binoculars, he already saw that the opposite horizon was covered by a large patch of darkness. Over there was a surge of darkness, a very large patch of darkness. The trees at the edge were slowly being pushed down and disappeared under the darkness. Xiedong's heart had a bad feeling, so he quickly picked up the binoculars and put them in front of his eyes. It would have been better if he didn't see it, but when he saw it, he was shocked. These rats were very big, and their momentum was unstoppable. They bit everything that passed by, leaving behind a pile of debris that was stepped on by countless rats. What made Xiedong's scalp numb was the number of these giant rats. Standing at least 7 or 8 kilometers away, he could clearly see that these rats were like a patch of black oil spreading outwards. At this speed, if these rats didn't stop, the nearest human base would suffer. Looking at the tens of thousands of giant rats in the distance, Xiedong frowned. He looked left and right and found that the black rat group was slowly expanding. It seemed that this rat group wasn't only coming in their direction. It was possible that the zoo was the center, and now it was slowly spreading outwards. After thinking about it, Xiedong immediately came down from the hill and then drove around the zoo to another direction to continue to observe. He wanted to find out where these mutated rats came from. Lin Xiao, who was in a meeting with the manager at the base, didn't know about this. "We should start from Jiaxing City. Zhe province belongs to us, and Jiangsu province belongs to them. This is the dividing line between Jiaxing City and Huzhou City." Lin Xiao stood in front of an upright writing board with a map of the Huadong region hanging on it. She took a stick and drew a line between Zhe province, Su province, and Hai City, splitting the two sides in half. If someone else was here, they would feel that the Universal Base was being too arrogant. Why did they think that Sea City Base would agree to such conditions? After leaving Sea City, the geographical resources were Jiangsu Province in the north and Zhejiang Province in the south. Originally, these two provinces were close to Sea City, which was also Sea City's resources. Other than Zhe Province and Jiangsu Province, there was also Anhui Province beyond the two provinces that Haiqing used to control. Now that Zhe Province had been cut off by the Universal Base, Haiqing would obviously lose a province's geographical resources. If they didn't have the strength and conditions, Haiqing wouldn't have agreed. Let's see what the other party wants and try our best to satisfy them. After all, cutting off 1/3 of their territory was obviously a bit too much. If it wasn't for Wu Qingyue's willingness to cooperate with them, they probably wouldn't have allowed them to build their base in Uptown. If it was anyone else, they would probably be kicked out. Lin Feng looked at her with a strange expression. What if Wu Chengyue wants you to marry him? Will you agree? In the past, they didn't think that Wu Chengyue would pursue their leader. At that time, they were prepared to give him a sufficient amount of precious food, and other conditions could be discussed. But now, the whole world knew that the leader of Sea City wanted to marry the leader of the Universal Base. After Lin Feng finished speaking, everyone's expression became strange, and the way they looked at Lin Xiao also changed. Only Lin Feng dared to say such a thing. Lin Xiao glanced at him expressionlessly, tried to maintain her dignity, and said, "Do you think I will agree?" Ahem. Actually, I think it's fine if the leader agrees. Just treat it as a marriage alliance between the two bases, Chun Yuding suddenly said. Lin Xiao said coldly, since the other party agreed to let us build a base here, they should have already known how to plan the area. And I don't think that Wu Chengyue is someone who would mix his private affairs with official affairs. He won't do that. Although Wu Chengyue had been acting like a rascal recently, Lin Xiao still knew where his bottom line was. And based on her understanding of his character, he wasn't someone who would kick someone when they were down. So Lin Feng's guess wouldn't come true. The others thought that it made sense. Indeed, Sea City's leader Wu shouldn't be that kind of person. And I understand. Lin Feng wouldn't say that he was just joking. He just wanted to see if there was a possibility of his sister getting married. In his previous life, he had been unmarried for more than 30 years, and he still wanted to be unmarried in this life. Thinking about how his siblings were all prepared to live on their own, Lin Feng felt inexplicably tired. Luckily, he was already married. Even Xiao Lu was 8 years old. Because the area hadn't been formally divided yet, the people of Sea City still liked to run to Zhe Province. And Hangzhou City was close to Sea City, so they would definitely pass through their base's area once they came out. In order to protect the secret of the All-Beings base as much as possible, it was still necessary to set up a perimeter. In addition to the problem of the area division, there was also the construction of the wall at the zombie base, which wasn't a concern. After all, there were more than 10,000 people in the base now, and they had the manpower. So the cultivation base still needed to increase the work of planting. Although Lin Xiao accepted the food from the Earth Dragon base, the future food still depended on the progress in this area. Another thing was that the group of people from the Earth Dragon base had to continue to observe for a period of time. The meeting quickly ended, and everyone left the conference hall with their respective documents. Lin Xiao looked at the map hanging behind her, thinking about Lin Feng's question just now, and her heart was still a little worried. A few hours later, Lin Xiao received the confirmed information about the rat tide from Xiedong. This wasn't good news for her or for the All-Beings base. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.